Alderman Nervin.
Here.
Alderman Adams.
Here.
Mayor Abendroth.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Have everybody. Turn it over to Administrator and give us a overview of the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the Appropriations Committee. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here tonight. This is obviously an important exercise. On behalf of the City of Mequon, staff has been hard at work preparing the FY 2016 budget. As you'll see in a moment, as Director Watson and I take you through some slides that are projecting up on the screen, we've been at this process since May of this year. Having come aboard just in January, I knew it was important to get an early start on the budget process, and staff has put forth a tremendous amount of effort in helping to prepare the document that you're here to review tonight. So, as I mentioned, Director Watson and I are going to take you through some slides. I think we'll turn it back over to the Mayor, and the Appropriations Committee will proceed as they choose. Just to give you a framework on where we started back earlier this year, we obviously, our starting point is the fiscal year 2015 budget, which you approved late last year. That budget was just over $19 million in total. Some of the quick facts or stats associated with that budget included $833,000 in capital expenditures. Our tax rate, as it has for many years, stayed constant at about $3.05. Full-time equivalents were just under 109. As you'll recall, a collective bargaining agreement, a new collective bargaining agreement was negotiated with the Mequon Police Association and finalized earlier this year. That called for a 2.25% salary adjustment across the board for all union members that's applicable this year. And a 2% adjustment was applied and approved for all non-union members or staff. New positions in this budget included one authorized police officer, and as we all know, approximately $300,000 was used to balance the budget last fall. So that's the starting point from which staff kind of took its cue to prepare the FY 2016 budget. As I mentioned, the budget process kicked off early this year. For my benefit as the new city administrator, each of the departments took time to present me with a review of their FY 2015 budget so I could understand what was in the current year's budget before heading into the development process for FY 16. In July, budget parameters were circulated to each of the departments, and capital requests were also due updates to our 5-year capital plan. In August, the operating budgets were due to the Finance Department, and those included expenditures, revenues, any adjustments to personnel, any proposed new initiatives or new spending, performance measures, which you've seen as a new element to the budget document this year, and the narratives, which are also included in your binders here tonight. Members of the Appropriations Committee will recall we had 3 preliminary budget meeting workshops back in September over 3 nights where each of the departments provided an overview of their strengths, their weaknesses, their opportunities, and their threats, and other pertinent information that we wanted you to be armed with as you reviewed the FY 2016 budget. In September, a very busy month for staff, we also reviewed each of the departmental budgets that was submitted in August. And you'll see on the screen, in October, staff and the budget team worked to wrap up the budget, and it was distributed mid-month here in October. The guiding principles that really helped us develop the proposals that you'll see and talk about tonight have been in place here in Mequon for many years. They include maintaining low property taxes, maintaining a commitment to improving and enhancing the city's infrastructure, providing excellent public safety services across police, fire, and even public works, and expanding the tax base through a strategic and balanced approach to economic development. So these principles have been in place. They've guided your budget development process for years on end, and we've continued to use those to guide us as we've worked on the staff end to bring you this year's budget. In terms of an overview of this year's document, we consider FY 2016 to be a right-sizing year, and we'll walk you through some slides which will show you some of the concerns and challenges that we had to address as we prepared this document. The FY 2016 budget not only maintains existing service levels across all departments, but in some cases, as you've seen, it expands service levels. We're accounting for some unbudgeted expenses that weren't included in the FY 2015 budget, but that we've had to include in the FY 2016 budget to be responsible to the city and the community. This budget meets all contractual requirements that the city has entered into over time. And many of the department budgets, if you look at the summary near the front of the document, many of the budgets by department are either flat or in some cases have been reduced. The budget focuses both on immediate needs and longer-term strategic needs within some of the departments, and the budget is structurally balanced without the use of any fund balance. Here's the conundrum that we face when we use fund balance to balance the budget. And I'm going to just kind of walk you through this graph real quickly. If we look at 2014, the revenues in blue match the expenditures in red. In that year, in 2014, we used $285,000 of fund balance to match revenues with expenditures, and so we had a balanced budget. We did the same thing last year in FY 2015. I wasn't here at the time, but $300,000 was used to match revenues with expenditures. But as we fast forward into 2016, that $300,000 is not recurring revenue. It's one-time revenue, and it automatically puts us at a $300,000 shortfall, so to speak, with existing expenditures that carry over on a year-to-year basis. So we're already starting $300,000 behind as we go to prepare the FY 2016 budget. So it's a challenge. It's not a challenge that we can't overcome, but it starts us in a little bit of a hole as we begin to look at addressing needs and addressing contractual obligations and addressing mandates and all the other spending that's not going to be on top of this 19217. Let's go to the next slide. Here's GFOA's best practice on budgeting, and they have a number of different best practices on budgeting that they distribute to local and state governments both in the United States and Canada. And I won't read this excerpt from Achieving a Structurally Balanced Budget, but you can see there's a statutory definition of a balanced budget in state and local government, and while using fund balance allows a government to achieve the statutory definition of balancing a budget whereby revenues meet expenditures, you can see that GFOA recommends maintaining structural balance where recurring revenues are equal to recurring expenditures. And so that's the approach that we've taken as we propose this FY 2016 budget to you, the Appropriations Committee, tonight. We're trying to get this budget structurally balanced. And when I say this is a right-sizing year, we're looking at this as a year to right-size and structurally balance. And going forward, we may not have to assume a proposed tax increase like we're looking at this year. We're looking at this as a year to right-size and get structurally balanced. And so there's an adjustment that needs to take place from a tax perspective. Let's move on. Some of the other challenges and concerns that we faced as we were putting together the budget, I mentioned some previously unbudgeted expenses. I won't roll through this whole list, but you can see in total we had about $144,000 in expenses that weren't contained or weren't identified as expenditures in FY 2015. Well, as much as we might not like to have to include that number in 2016, being responsible budgeters, we have to include that. And so we've got some salary and some benefit increases on the police side and the fire side that we have to cook in or bake into this budget going forward. So that's another $144,000 that we're looking at that we have to account for with either new revenue or expenditure reductions. We've also got some mandated spending that was alluded to in the budget transmittal letter in your budget binders. Workers' comp is going up almost $11,000 due to some increased experience in a couple of our operating departments over the last couple of years. We've also got some additional expenses related to 4 elections that we may potentially have to administer in 2016 a presidential year. We've got to account for that money. We can't just spend that money without budgeting it. So we've got another $48,000 that we've got to include in the mix. I mentioned contractual increases and contractual obligations. We've got a number of smaller contractual increases that you can see at the top of the table, which are part and parcel to budgeting and part and parcel to assuming costs and managing costs on a year-over-year basis. But you're also seeing a couple of other larger numbers with the new assessor contract. That impact is almost $80,000. And then we've got year 2 of the collective bargaining agreement with, again, salary adjustments of 2.25% and officers contractually moving through their salary ranges and getting step increases. That's an obligation that we have to meet, almost of $100,000. So there's another $189,000 of spending that we have to account for here in FY 2016. Another concern or challenge that we had to face was a decline in a couple of our revenue sources to the tune of about $61,000. As was previously mentioned in one of the Friday bulletins, the state did away with compliance inspections with the passage of their FY 2015 budget earlier this year. The city is no longer in the business of doing compliance inspections prior to the sale of real estate or a residence. So that's $18,000 in revenue that we won't have to carry over next year. We also saw almost a $44,000 reduction in state highway aid from 15 to 16. So we're starting to add together some challenges and concerns that we have to overcome as we put together the FY 2016 budget. Finally, we had some emergent spending occur throughout FY 2015 that we need to account for in 2016 in terms of being responsible with our budgeting. The police department is incurring additional costs to get open records from various cell carriers related to investigations and fulfilling their own records requests. We've also added some interns, both in the administrator's office and the fire department, to the tune of about $30,000. Interns are a great bang for the buck. They don't draw benefits. They don't use vacation time, or they aren't paid for vacation time. They're typically students, either undergraduate or graduate students, and we get a lot of bandwidth and a lot of throughput from their efforts. And I think the chief will tell you those interns have been a godsend to him in helping staff the stations and keep down some of his other costs across the board. So when we add it all together, the gap is just under $800,000 between the fund balance, previously unbudgeted expenses, mandated spending, contractual increases, declining revenue, and emergent spending. And so that's kind of the hole or the gap that we kind of had to dig out before we could even consider any salary adjustments for non-union staff, any new spending, or any other proposed initiatives that the departments were queuing up and developing in response to the SWOT analyses that you all saw in September. So I'm going to turn it over to Director Watson, and he's going to kind of run through some of the revenue enhancements and general big picture a look at the budget.
Yeah, thanks. So some of the things that we were able to identify, besides obviously taxes to help balance this budget, are some pretty good increases in permit activity. We think for 2016 we're going to have a very good year as far as permits, especially with subdivisions coming online, and then some commercial projects around the city. Public safety was able to identify some permitting, some fines and fees that we think we can identify for 16 that we didn't have before. The chargebacks for support staff to the water and sewer utilities, we think is going to increase about $20,000, and then some, basically miscellaneous revenue, interest income would help get us to about $417,000, and that doesn't include any new taxes or anything like that.
And these revenue enhancements aren't just throwing a dart on the board and saying, okay, this number looks good, it's going to help us patch the budget. We did a detailed trend analysis, a 3-year trend analysis relative to all of our revenue line items. And these adjustments not only reflect trend, but actual actual trend results over the last couple of years, and also some forecasting, honestly, or frankly, with respect to some of the activity that we anticipate seeing here in FY 2016.
So when you look at all those revenues broken down by various major components, we're looking at about $300,000+ of licenses, fines and forfeitures, and charges for services. Makes up the lion's share of the change in total revenue year on year. The other revenue line includes the fact that we're not proposing the use of any fund balance, so $300,000 is removed from that line, leaving a net drop of $250,000. And the offset for that obviously would be taxes. We're looking at a total revenue change of about 2.31%. But you can see the largest on a year-on-year percentage increase are in those middle three lines: licenses, fines, and charges for services. On the expenditure side, this is before any new initiatives that we'll be talking about in a minute, but we're looking at a year-on-year change of about $350,000, 2.3%. The largest dollar amount is salaries, based on some of the contractual increases that we've talked about. Benefits are pretty much stable. Staff was able to identify some savings in materials, supplies, plant, and purchase, and equipment that offset a great deal of the changes in salaries and contractual services. As part of the workup, staff put together capital spending requests of about $2.1 million. The handout that you got tonight was based on a question we got from an elected official asking about what is the status of our capital projects. And so we've done that analysis for you on this multicolored document. But the funding request for 16 is $833,000, and we've split out or highlighted how those $833,000 of levy-supported projects would break out. We're looking at about, I think it was a $40,000 increase in public works rolling stock. We've got new funding this year for the Emerald Ash Borer project. We're able to put aside some money for the police department vehicles and other replacement equipment, some small server work, and then some drainage projects. And we get to, it's actually virtually the same amount that we funded in 2015. It's within $97.
So now we shift our focus to some of the new initiatives that staff is proposing for FY 2016. And as we pulled together all of these initiatives and we kind of grouped them, we kind of hit on some general themes. And the first is customer service. As you've seen in your documents, staff is proposing $30,000 to revamp the city website, which is sorely in need of a refresh, reestablishing a quarterly newsletter to help push information out to the community and out to our residents and our taxpayers, and to fully implement the agenda management system that we purchased a couple of years ago to make documents more accessible and our meetings and other meetings of boards and commissions more user-friendly. As we've mentioned, we have a new city assessor in place. There was a report distributed last Friday in the bulletin talking about some of the things that he's come across since he's assumed his duties here in Mequon this last July. And we're very confident that over the next year and a half, this new city assessor is going to put us in a place, or the former city assessor who's now back, is going to put us in a place where we're realizing additional value and everyone's getting accurate assessments relative to their property. It's a function that touches every parcel of land and every piece of personal property here in the city. It's our obligation to get it right. And so we're seeing an increase there, but we think it's good customer service. In the community development department, we're recommending an inspection supervisor. The all-in cost with an April 1 start date is just under $80,000 for FY 2016. We're also recommending a review, management review, and a staffing analysis of the community development department as part of an effort to put together a strategic plan for that department to make sure that we're appropriately staffed, appropriately resourced, and appropriately situated to deal with development that's going to be coming here in the next several years in Mequon. We also have a part-time, half-time utility customer service rep that will be in the finance department that will be funded through the sewer and water utilities to help us absorb some of the customer service issues that we'll be dealing with as we bring in new customers from Thiensville and new customers from Bayside, particularly on the water utility. We don't think Mequon taxpayers should subsidize that. It's right for those expenses to come directly out of the sewer and the water utilities. In terms of the inspection supervisor, the materials in your binder alluded to the fact that permit activity is up 33% since 2010. We anticipate that this position would be involved in state and local building inspections, overseeing those inspections here on behalf of the city with our 2 current inspectors, also involving himself or herself on the zoning and property maintenance inspection side of the department, and also helping out with some of our plan reviews, which are currently done by a contracted employee who I think is in the process of disengaging from his arrangement here with the city. We see this position being a force multiplier because we're going to actually have somebody in the field who's able to exercise technical judgment and interpret situations where there may be a disagreement or there may be additional discussion warranted on the part of a particular inspection or a particular issue. That's going to allow our planning staff, particularly Kim and Jack, to spend more time focusing on short-term and long-range planning issues and economic development, which is a big priority for the city. Right now, as many of you know, Kim and Jack are involved in both the building and the planning side of the house, and they're really the only 2 folks that deal with or that are skilled, trained, and experienced to deal with planning issues. So we need to put a little more effort there, and we think by putting this inspection supervisor in place, we're going to hit both sides of the ledger. This person or this individual or this employee will also help us address the backlog of permits that we identified during the SWOT analysis, and also help us with our migration to the Munis permitting and inspection software that we're looking to get ramped up here in 2016. This position as a supervisor will also be the standalone or the go-to liaison for the Architectural Board, the Landmarks Commission, and the Board of Appeals. We won't have different staff liaisons showing up at different meetings. This will be a person who's got supervisory authority and will be in a position to help service those boards and commissions. Another major theme was infrastructure that we identified as we went through putting together the budget. As you all know, we've got year 2 of the road improvements or the borrowing coming up, and the Public Works Committee will be reviewing that schedule of road work and improvements early next year. We've also had lengthy discussions about the Public Works Combined Facility. That's another big infrastructure project coming for 2016. We may not spend a lot of time talking about that tonight. We just took it up at the Common Council meeting earlier this month. And then as Tom mentioned, we've got continued funding for many items, including drainage, roadway lighting, bike lane construction, and our asset management software. Turning the dial over, another major theme within the new initiatives that we're including in this year's budget, public safety. We talked a little bit about Emerald Ash Borer. $75,000 of new spending is included in this year's budget to start making a dent on all of the ash trees that are beginning to wilt and die here in Mequon on public property and in public rights-of-way. We're also recommending a second full-time position within the budget, a records dispatch supervisor in the police department. This is also an April 1 start date. The all-in cost for April 1 would be about $60,000. We're, as Tom mentioned, recommending new squad vehicles within the police department, and we're in the process of converting to sport utility vehicles in 2016. The bump in spending to $150,000 will be able to help us make that conversion nearly complete in 2016, but we're not able to use the equipment that we have outfitted our sedans with in the Tahoes because they're different size vehicles. So we're seeing an increase in the cost to convert to the Tahoes because they're no longer making the Chevy Impalas, the sedans. And we're also going to be putting new automatic external defibrillators in all of the cars, in all of the squads. Years ago, we received a donation of those AEDs for the squad cars, but they've become obsolete, and we need to stay current with the technology. Lastly, on the public safety side, staff is recommending a fire department study, also a staffing analysis to make sure that our staffing levels are appropriate and to also look at potential partnership opportunities here in the local area. To talk a little bit more about the dispatch supervisor position just for a moment, it will not only oversee dispatch, but also clerical staff in the records division. We anticipate this will be a non-sworn position, a civilian position that has dispatch experience. Currently, one of the captains in the police department, Scott Tyler, is overseeing the entire dispatch operation. He has never been a dispatcher. He's a sworn officer and has been a veteran employee in the department for over 30 years, but he's never been a dispatcher. We need somebody who's overseeing 10 dispatchers to have the requisite experience for that function. This position will be involved in training new dispatchers, both full-time and part-time, helping to process and manage and organize all of the Freedom of Information requests that are getting more extensive and more complicated each and every year. They'll handle all scheduling for dispatch and the records divisions. We're moving towards emergency medical dispatch in early 2016. One of the requirements to provide emergency medical dispatch is to have somebody designated as a supervisor for your dispatch center. This position is going to help us meet that mandate, and as I've mentioned on the slide, that's going to be a force multiplier for us because that's going to be getting real-time information directly into the hands of people that are calling 911. That's going to help anybody that's in a compromised situation health-wise, potentially until we get our first responders there to provide more advanced care. We also think this is going to be a force multiplier because, frankly, there have been instances, maybe on the second and third shift, the overnight shift, where we've had to pull people in to help process some of these records requests. And we've got sworn officers and or sergeants doing clerical work. We've got to get those folks back out on the road where they belong, doing the job that they were hired to do. We think this position will be a force multiplier and help us push other positions to take on more work and do what they've been hired to do.
So on the tax impact, we're looking at a levy increase total overall of about $750,000. It's broken down across all the funds, with the general fund getting about a third of that. The sewer utility, we got notice earlier a month ago from MMSD that the capital charge that they are projecting for the city is going up. So by history, the city's always put that cap charge on the property tax bill of sewer customers. So that's a part of our levies going to that pass-through from MMSD. There's no new funding or additional funding for the library or for capital projects. We are proposing some new initiatives, which we've discussed a little bit, for about $235,000. And then as we go through additional years of borrowing for roads, that debt service continues to increase as well. So the levy increase amount we're proposing is about $145,000. When you look at just percentage of levy, you can actually see that the general fund percent of the total is going down from about 46 to about 45%. The sewer utility is taking a little bit more, and debt service is increasing as well. So when you slice up that pie, we're looking at about $750,000. Debt service and sewer utility are driving that increase as well as the general fund. So when we look at the impact, the debt service is increasing. We're talking about our first real mill rate increase in about 7 years. 3.6% for this year breaks down to about 0.5% if you average that over the last 7 years since the last real increase. A hypothetical $350,000 house would see an increase in their taxes of about $37.50. The budget still meets the state levy limits. We're far below our levy capacity, and I can go into that more if you have questions. We still have an excellent tax rate in the state of Wisconsin compared to any other significantly sized city. The sewer rate, because of that cap charge, would go up for Mequon owners that have a property inside the sewer utility area. That would be going up about a penny per thousand. And if we get into the water utility budget at some point, we're not proposing any rate increase. So for somebody that's a Mequon water and sewer customer, you can kind of see a snapshot that they'd be looking at a small increase in their general taxes, about a penny increase in their sewer taxes, and they could probably feel fairly assured that their water bill will not go up due to rate increases. So as I mentioned, I did some digging, and I found that last year Mequon's mill rate, combined general and sewer, is the 5th lowest of any municipality with a population greater than 15,000. We still have, if you're wondering, even with this budget as is, we have over $900,000 of levy capacity that we are not proposing to use. We're going into year 4 of interfund borrowing from the capital project fund to TID 3. That still allows the capital project fund to have enough cash to pay their bills to fund the projects that we've been talking about. In case you're interested, though, the TID debt is general obligation debt. So even though we've always said that TID has to pull its own weight, it is GO debt, and it's available for placement on the levy if we so choose.
So as Tom explained on that previous table, talking about the tax impact, the general levy impact comes down to 2 main categories. The 249, which is going to take care of all of this stuff that we've talked about here tonight, and then the 235 for new initiatives. And if you add those together and you pull out the debt service and the sewer charge, we're looking at about $485,000 impact on the levy, which is equivalent to almost 11 cents. But if you look at the economic value, everything that we're picking up here and then everything that we're getting here, it's almost double that 485 number. We're taking care of all of these issues moving forward into FY 2016. We're also addressing some real immediate and longer-term needs that we've identified as we've gone through the SWOT analyses. So we're taking a balanced approach here to getting our budget structurally balanced and taking care of all of these expenses and mandates and revenue declines and so forth here, and then handling some new emerging needs that we feel are really important to get into this budget. So we started out with a slide that kind of had the fast facts on FY 2015. Here's the slide that has the fast facts on 2016. The budget will be just under $20 million as proposed. As Tom mentioned, capital is staying flat. The tax rate would be 3.15 or almost 3.16. We're going to see a 2.6 bump in our full-time equivalents, those 2 full-time positions and the half-time position. The cost of living adjustment for union personnel will again be 2.25. We're proposing 1.75 for non-union. That's below the 2% that was granted this current fiscal year. And as I mentioned, we've got the 2 full-time positions and the part-time utility clerk, which frankly and obviously comes out of the water and the sewer utilities. And we feel like this budget is, again, an opportunity to right-size and get our budget balanced structurally. And as the budget team has gone through this process of putting the budget together, there are some longer term strategic initiatives that we're going to have discussions about probably next year as a staff and as a council and through our committees about what are some of the things we're going to need to do long term to ensure the fiscal sustainability of the city of Mequon. And one of the things we're proposing here is eliminate deficit budgeting. And we want to also preserve our cash balance or our fund balance so that we can absorb any hiccups that may come our way at some point, and also protect our bond rating, because we are borrowing now almost on a yearly basis. And there's other items, I won't spend a lot of time talking about this. This was not in the budget, and we're not here to talk about this. But these are the strategic initiatives that are all, if you look at them, they're all interconnected, and they all relate to one another. And they're all big spending or big cost centers with respect to what we do. And if we can do a good job of managing these various initiatives over time and throughout the organization, we're going to be in a very good place to sustain ourselves fiscally and moderate or limit the impact of a tax increase or a tax adjustment in any one year. So we're proposing a right-size approach this year. It's a little bit of an adjustment in terms of where we've been over the last several years, but we think this is going to put us on a good platform moving forward to further address other identified needs that are not included in this budget in subsequent years, but also to control and manage any growth in the tax rate going forward. And we'd rather control that than be controlled by other things that might force us to do things reactively. So that's kind of an overview of the budget and our presentation from myself and Director Watson. And we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. And Mr. Mayor, we'll throw it back over to you.
Current year budget is trending positive. To what extent?
Well, the budget, as you know, assumed a transfer of $300,000 of fund balance. I haven't done that transfer yet, but right now, without that transfer, we're looking at a deficit of about 150.
So we're about at 150 ahead.
Right.
Okay. The tax levy cap, tax levy can increase by the percentage of new construction. And our new construction is what?
Well, that's partially true, but to answer your direct question, it's about 132,000 of net new construction.
For the
The levy can increase by net new construction plus the amount of new debt being added. And we're not including all of our debt when we send in our levy. So that's why we've got that extra cushion, if you will, of additional debt capacity.
Yeah, new debt since 2007,
2005.
2005, which I believe it's been our policy to not include that in prior years.
I think that's it's not a it's an unwritten policy.
Right.
It's been a practice.
It's been a practice. So we have an increase in the levy of $750,000 under past practice. We would have increased it by 132.
Just so you get perspective
Yes.
of the difference here.
132, we've been increasing taxes, and now
Well,
it's
that's what,
$750,000.
under past practice, that would have been the levy cap that we would have shot for, increasing the levy by 132.
What did we do different to make it to 3.304? Put some of the debt in there?
Including debt service costs,
Which we've never done historically. Okay.
correct.
I wouldn't say we've never done, we have done it, but I think when you look at this chart, which I will find, if the net new construction amount is 132, even the amount of new debt service is more than the amount of net new construction allowed. Or the MMSD cap charge alone would absorb all of that new construction.
Right.
So,
So obviously, those are challenges.
correct.
But that's the way we did it in the past. Those were the numbers we shot for when we were doing the budget. We didn't include the debt service to raise the cap. And this is the second year that MMSD has basically eaten up our new construction value.
At least the second year.
Right. Okay. Just so we know where we're at. If anybody wants a no tax rate increase, we need
$750,000.
Wait, no tax rate increase is $750,000? You mean the 120, right?
No.
We're at 450.
The levy went up $750,000. So if you don't want to increase taxes, you need spending cuts or new revenue that adds up to $750,000. Just so you know what we're working with. Okay?
Alderman Hopkins.
I know we're going to be discussing facilities, but I'd like to propose at this meeting, we take a serious look at the Logeman Center, whether we need to keep it or whether we need to have activities that occur there, occur at other city-owned facilities, including housing, offices of Gathering on the Green and Historical Center or Historical Society, either here, the library, or other facilities. You can have events at any one of our park buildings, but that's an expense, an annual expense that both Mequon and Thiensville incur. Two, I don't think we ought to be introducing or reintroducing the city newsletter. There were 2 major articles in today's news graphic that people can go to the library for free if they don't subscribe to that, or go to the city website. I do think the city website probably should be upgraded, and the expense for that we should eat. But I don't think we need to reintroduce that city newsletter, particularly if there's any postage involved in sending it out. 3, and I know this is going to sound cruel and heartless, but I think we got to look at bike paths. Do we really need $20,000 in new bike paths in the city? And 4, again, this is not for tonight, really, but it's something we really should take a very, very serious look at. And again, it's going to sound cruel and heartless, but the swimming pool, it's old, it's outdated, needs a lot of maintenance annually. The attendance is going down. Most of our citizens with that new pass, universal pass, are going to other pools, and why do we need to keep maintaining the swimming pool? So those are just 4 ideas that I want to throw out, and hope we have either committees or other groups taking a look at.
Well, John, I think that's interesting, but tonight we can't
No,
make those
we're
big
not. No,
decisions. You're talking about for next year's budget.
Right.
I just want to be clear.
Alderman Buchanan.
There are 2 things that I'd like to just raise up for consideration. One of the items on one of the slides was that a goal is to stabilize and modernize our facilities, our existing city facilities. We're not, in this budget, we're not budgeting for any repair or refurbishing of any of those facilities, in large part because we recognize the need for facility assessment, but we're also not budgeting for any facility assessment. So that means we're going a year without repair or refurbishing anything in the process of review a few weeks ago of all of our various departments. We heard of needs for repairs and refurbishment that we should be addressing. We're not addressing it, and we're not budgeting for an assessment. I think that's a mistake on our part. If we don't assess this year, how are we going to budget next year to address facilities? We don't want to see these things get in bad shape. The other thing is we've talked about in several places in the discussion, the presentation, talked about the new medical emergency dispatch that we support and we certainly want to go for. Most of that is going to come to us as a gift from, I think is Aurora,
Aurora,
is it
yeah.
not? Aurora
And
Foundation.
St. Mary's.
However, I just want to make sure that we are recognizing that to participate in that gift, we have a potential $20,000 share put into that. Is that in this budget?
It is not, and we have been able to secure a commitment from St. Mary's for $10,000 worth of that $20,000 commitment, and we're presently working with them to see if we can get the other $10,000 so that our cost would be nothing.
Okay, so.
We're working with their healthcare foundation to see if we can get that funding to cover the city's costs.
In the event that does not come through, then we have to find that 10,000.
We will have to
That'll be
address
an
that situation.
Unbudgeted expense that we will have to incur.
Potentially, yes.
Okay. As long as we recognize that
We
we're
do.
going to have to do it.
We do.
Okay.
Let me suggest we broaden our view here for a second and take a look at the impact of this budget on the taxpayers. You know, historically, we obviously we keep taxes low, and they're very low. And for the last 5, 6, 7 years, they haven't even budged. So this one budgets it quite a bit compared to what we've always done, and it increases the levy by $750,000. So before we start talking about specific items in the budget, perhaps you'd want to express your feelings on whether we need to reduce that tax levy increase or not.
Should you just go around the room? I say
Jump
we
right in,
reduce it.
Alderman Strelka.
Well, I just kind of wanted to talk broad spectrum and not go maybe into specifics, where as we're looking at the potential increase of the levy, I look at the items that are on the chopping block and the other items that are coming forward. You know, reducing bike paths, reducing pool, reducing Logamen. There's still no additional funding in parks budget. As we are looking at an increase in budget, some of them are state mandates. Those are, you know, those absolutely have to be covered. There's increase in wages that is, you know, traditionally important to maintain quality staff. But I think what I struggle with is we're increasing our overhead, but we're not providing a benefit for the resident in addition to what they have. We're not increasing the quality of life of the city of Mequon. We're just making the engine run smoother. We're adding oil to the engine, or premium oil to the engine as we're running, but we're not offering something new or enhancing a service that's available. The reason our pool, in my opinion, one example, and again, don't get hung up on the pool point, but the reason our pool is not doing well is because we haven't put money towards it in years. The reason our parks maybe aren't used as much as they could be is because we haven't put enough funding into the infrastructure in our parks, and the budget isn't there to do that. Police department obviously needs the key people. They've needed that for years. I think not pulling from the general fund is a strong positive. I'll be the first to come forward to state that, because I beat Alderman Nurbin to the punch. That was his gripe. He made that point loud and clear in the last 2 years running. He made the point, so I didn't need to. But borrowing money to balance the budget is ineffective government. So the right sizing, I do agree with that premise. I do agree with the fact that we're not borrowing from our general fund, reducing our ability if we do need to borrow money. But as we are borrowing money, and as we did borrow for 2 years of roads, and as we're looking at a new DPW facility, again, a lot of the premise for this discussion is to find efficiencies in the future. And this year, we've got a lot of options for, you know, it's a fiscally reasonable increase in the budget. I think it was well thought out. However, where are those efficiencies going to really hit in the future as we're looking at a new DPW facility? Are we going to have that, you know, that savings from that main area? Are we going to have, you know, less overhead? Because as you invest in a company, some of it's just to maintain it. The other part of it is to find efficiencies in the future. I want to make sure the discussion stays strong in the efficiencies so that we have that financial opportunity to save. As we're adding people for inspections, I want to make sure those permits are covering that cost. Again, as I think I brought up previously in, our other meetings when we were kind of going over a couple of these items, as we're looking at an increase in needs for permits and things like that, those costs should be offset by the development. And that line item, I don't know that it should hit the taxpayer in those years. It just, in general, if we have an increase in development, we have an increase in permit fees, we can bring on another staff person and we're at net. So I think there's a couple things that needed fixing in the city, and I think Will's looking at those items, and I think he's coming forward with a reasonable proposal. As we work through this, let's make sure that we maintain a focus on an efficient government, efficient spend, something that's gonna benefit us in the future. And I would like us as a council and a committee to really look at quality of life in the city of Mequon. If we are gonna raise taxes on any premise, customer service when people are coming to the city is one benefit, but when you have kids in the city, or if you wanna enjoy walking in your parks, you wanna maintain park. You want something to do with your children and not have to leave the city. The reason we had an increase, prime example, the reason we had an increase in pool permit fees is because Cedarburg allowed you to go on that group pass this year. Cedarburg invested in renovations in their pool. They're the hottest pool in the area. We need to look at amenities within our city that are gonna be pleasing to families and individuals with empty nesters, so they have something to do in their own community. That's just my point.
I guess it's my turn. One of the easiest things to do is to spend other people's money. And I can see inside, and I'm not gonna be voting for, now I may vote for some increase. I don't think that this increase is appropriate. Some of the premise that you're starting this out on is incorrect. One of it is that using $300,000 to balance the budget, and that was a one-time spend for the equipment replacement, emergency equipment replacement at the police department. And that's how everybody voted on that this time, unless I'm incorrect on that, but that's the reason why we used that last time. So, and I can't remember what the total cost of the board was on that, but we did that to use that. Now, since that was a one-time spend, that should not be in this year's budget for that amount, because it was a one-time paid off through our reserves, unless I'm incorrect on that. But I do think there's a number of areas inside of the budget here that we can cut back on. And while I do think there are some needs, and I did discuss some needs that the police department does need some with, but I'm not really 100% sure it's getting to the area that was requested beforehand for it. I know some of it is because of the open records request. One of the other big hang-ups was the fact of doing all the research and doing all the investigation for identity theft. I don't know if that's going to be addressing any of that with it. I know that was one of the issues that took up a lot of officer time, and which was not allowing officers to be out on the street, and was keeping them back inside of the safety building doing that type of research. I don't know if that's being addressed on this or not. But I think there's a lot of areas inside here and that we can do some cutting inside of it, and I'll leave the rest of my comments until we get to that point, if we do.
Alderman Irving?
I think with respect to the fund balance, I think the $300,000 was budgeted. We spent more above and beyond that to pay for the 911 system. Am I correct?
That's correct. It was
Yeah.
300 plus 174.
300 wasn't that. That was the budgeted amount, and then there was more spent on top.
But we added that into, what it was a one-time expense because we
Well,
couldn't
they're two
replace,
separate
we couldn't do it,
issues.
right. But
Yeah.
this year, it's not in that budget.
We tagged fund balance
But we're
twice.
still going up $300,000 in that department. Now, there's,
We tagged it twice, one to balance the budget for 300, and then a one-time purchase of the 911 system for 174.
Now, 174, that's what we put the money towards last budget.
It was closer to $500,000.
Correct.
This was the second year that money was taken from the general fund to balance the budget.
And the
I
general
don't
fund
think
is,
that's a good practice.
well, the practice is 15% by resolution, we all know that.
and we're way over that right now.
The only thing we've ever used the undesignated reserve for is to smooth out the tax levy. That's the only thing we've ever used that money for, realistically.
And the dispatch console.
Okay, well, I think we paid for it, and then we took the money out of the reserve after we paid for it. But that's the only thing we've used that money for. And to say that's deficit budgeting is somewhat inaccurate, because we taxed people for that money, and that's where we had you saw the slide with the revenues equaling expenditures. We taxed people on an equal basis. Revenues exceeded expenditures. We didn't give the money back, we kept it. It's in the bank, and that's what we use to smooth out the tax levy. So it's previously taxed money, previously accrued tax receipts. And so if you don't want to use that money that accrues, the excess money that accrues, and you don't want to do deficit budgeting, then you have to do more critical budgeting. Everything needs to be cut a little bit on the front end, so we don't end up the year with an excess. That's a little harder to do. So I don't think it's wrong to tap into that fund. And we have $2.5 million in there, cash. We also have, according to this, we have about $2 million in designated reserve funds. So we're sitting on a lot of cash that we tax the people for. And to use a little bit of it to smooth out the tax levy over the years doesn't seem like a foolish thing to do at all. Okay.
While I agree that we want to keep our taxes low, I also recognize that the funds that we have accumulated in the undesignated category help to establish good bond rating for this city when we do have to go out and borrow. It's been recommended to us to try and maintain that a little higher than we're at. That would seem to be a good thing. The other thing is we have at this point, we don't have replacement plans in place for a number of the things that have been donated to the city. A good example being the AED units that we have to replace in the police squad cars. Also donated to us the first time around, but we didn't establish a practice of setting aside a little money at a time for the ultimate replacement of that. We're not doing that for our canine unit. We've been very fortunate that two times in a row we've had a donation of that canine officer. But we can't count on that, and we don't have any plans in place. So it seems to me maintaining a small general fund is a wise thing to do. And I think an 11-cent per thousand increase after 7 years of virtually no increase is not a major issue. I realize that there will be some people who will have a knee-jerk reaction simply because it's an increase. But we're talking about, on $1 million house, an additional $110 a year. That's not even, for many people, it's not an evening out. It's not a golf game. It seems penny wise, pound foolish for us to be sitting here saying, gosh, we can't have an 11-cent increase after 7 years. It just doesn't make any sense that we don't. I'm looking at a budget that I think that there should be additional spending of things that we need, like the parks maintenance. I mean, that's a department that has been cut back in the last 20 years Well, we've increased parks. We have increased parks, we have people wanting to use those parks more and more. They, as Alderman Strelchuk said, they do want them maintained. And that department, we've cut back and back and back and back over the years. We have a growing city. We ought to be able to support these things. I support this budget.
It's funny, I'm not getting phone calls about those parks. I'm getting a lot of accolades. When I campaigned, I probably hit at least 700 doors. And I really feel like I have a pulse, and a lot of people like the low taxes. And to me, to just say that's penny wine pound foolish to raise our taxes is wrong in my mind. I'm not getting phone calls about, you make it sound like the city is, just so dark right now, but it's not. People are liking our city, they're liking what our community has to offer. The roads, my God, they're gorgeous. And, don't forget, these are the same people, and I know we don't talk about other people's things, but the school referendum got passed. And that's a big increase for a lot of houses. I think $1 million house comes to be almost another $200 a year, and that's just the first year. So our community is paying for a lot of things besides just our taxes, but people like the low taxes. And I think that we need to work at this budget, get it down, and consider using the designated reserves. And we can get into the issues later, like Dale said.
Alderman Nervi.
Well, last year because the only one who didn't vote for the budget, I called it a structural deficit. Previous administrator looked at me like I had 16 eyeballs or something. So thanks for calling it what it is. The 300,000 year after year, how long can you do it? You pull 300,000 out, you put 150 back at the end of the year, which we're projecting for this year. You're still trending down. So I guess I could see using as much fund balance as I'm projecting to finish the year with. But that's 150, not 300. I'm not suggesting we make that a thing, but I don't want it to be trending negative. There is a good argument that 15% we have as our policy may not be enough compared to surrounding communities for our bond rating. We still have the issue of the IOU we're doing from the TID to the TID from the Capital Improvement Project Fund for the 4th year in a row for another $360,000. I think we're going to be close to 1.5 million we've taken from the Capital Improvement Project Fund to fund the underperforming TIF district. So how long can we reasonably do that? And when does that money get paid back? I think it gets paid back behind all the TIF debt. So it's backloaded on the end. We won't pay that money back for 15, 20 years. Am I correct?
I didn't do the projections. I probably need financial advisors to help us with that, but we are paying our debts as they come due. The reason it's going up is because principal kicked in this year. So we're paying all that debt first, and then when the cash flow is positive, the excess will start coming back to the city.
I think we really ought to look at that next year and try and trend that out, because what aren't we doing with our capital improvement project fund that we thought we were going to do with the money we've taken and given to the TIF district to make ends meet on that?
Well, basically what we're
There's
doing.
probably some deferred maintenance, other things that are piling up there that we're not really talking about.
Basically, what we're doing right now is swapping cash for an IOU, so it's basically using cash to pay. We still have enough cash. We have cash in there from the debt service, from the road borrowing, from the sinking funds. They all don't need that cash in 2016, so a receivable instead of cash is okay in the next couple of years. At some point, it might be an issue, but usually we always have more cash on hand than we need for that particular year.
I just
But it's money that's,
then we shouldn't even be setting aside for it. Then
It is designated, but when you look at this as a giant pot, we're just basically reallocating some of that cash. Because not everybody uses
taking
all,
from Peter to pay Paul.
correct.
Okay.
Well, we called it a loan.
Right.
It is a loan, right?
Paul's got to pay Peter back someday.
Someday, yeah. You know, our auditor, and I think you were there, categorized our undesignated reserve policy as more than adequate at the 10 to 15%, and said that the bond companies always ask for more. So we're AA1, and we have 16.2% in a reserve. Grafton, I read in the papers, AA2, and they have 25 to 40% in their reserve. And it's probably even bigger, because their budget's pretty big. So I don't see the correlation to the bond rating. You know, we pay our debts, so they'll always loan us money. We shouldn't worry about that. And with the TIF debt, you know, that's real annoying that we have to do that. But what we could do is take that $2.5 million and apply it to the TIF debt. Then we wouldn't have that problem.
Well, we can't prepay the TIF debt. It's not, you cannot call it, it's not callable till
Use it to pay the
4 or
debt.
5 years from now.
Use it to pay the debt. Then we wouldn't have to borrow from ourselves. Get the TIF paid off sooner.
I think we are paying it, but we can only do it 1 year at a time. Through a loan from ourselves.
But we have the money to pay it. But we're just keeping it in the bank at 0% interest.
I don't think we can prepay it, though.
You
Yeah,
cannot prepay.
we're hamstrung by the terms of that.
You can pay off TIFs early.
No.
Yeah.
Well,
Not with.
You
don't have
not
to
with-
wait
not with
27
non-increment money,
years.
though.
I think you're talking about closing out the TIF, and we're talking about paying off the debt that's anchored by the TIF. And that is not, you cannot prepay the debt. But I think the mayor is saying that instead of interfund borrowing, that we use reserves to make that debt service instead of a borrowing. Is that correct?
Yeah. Then you wouldn't have to worry about that.
We already
That's
borrowed.
fiscally conservative. We have the money to pay the bill, but we're not paying it. Mr. Altshuler.
Just a quick question on the bond rating. If we go from AA1 down one level, what's the percentage increase on that ballpark-ish? Or if you got a specific number?
I don't have a number.
It won't be much.
Won't be nothing
It
at all.
won't be much. It won't be, you wouldn't even notice it. That's what I do I do that stuff, so you're not gonna, right now those spreads are so tight in those markets. They're not wide, and when you're at 13, 14% interest, you're gonna have big spreads. Your spreads are eighth of a point.
An eighth of a point. But what does that hit us on borrowing every year? Because we're doing 1.7 million on average for roads. We're looking at the DPW. I guess I'm kind of looking to see, because as we're going through and we're kind of getting into some policy discussion on that general fund with this discussion. Last year when we discussed this, we kind of highlighted, at least I highlighted a request to know what that benchmark percentage was. And we've kind of had, being on finance for over half the year, we had some feedback that was somewhat inconsistent on the feedback on percentage that they like to see. One discussion was 15%, another discussion was 18 to 20, and then we got the spreadsheet on the finance committee where it had neighboring communities, and they were all over the board. There's a lot of things that go into that bond rating. As we're doing this discussion, that summary would be really, really helpful to know,
Well, we talked a little bit about this at F&P a couple of weeks ago, but I've got a chart there if you just want to turn around real quick.
Sure.
Just projecting the borrowing for the new Public Works facility next year and start paying for that in 17. And then one more road borrowing in 18, just for this. By the year 2018 or so, we're going to be paying more in just this red amount is interest. We're going to be paying as much for interest as we did for debt service in '08. So interest gets to be a bigger factor for us going forward, and frankly, the way we're going, with borrowing for roads. I don't see that level.
But that's not the
Going
difference
down.
that's not the difference in between the ratings. That's just in the amount that we're borrowing, that we're paying that much interest.
When our credit rating goes down, likely we're gonna pay more for interest, and so that red portion's gonna be more.
You do, but the question is how much do they raise your interest rate on that?
Right.
And unfortunately, Moody's, when they take a look at ours, they don't consider all of our balanced funds that we have in for all of our equipment that we have. They don't consider that at all. They just consider the general, the other fund inside there. So when you take a look at us in comparison to other cities, because we do have those funds for equipment replacement and for all that, if you load that into it and double those together, our fund balance that we really have, our actual fund balances that we have is considerably higher than what you guys are recommending in F&P, because of the fact of having those extra 2 million and stuff like that. A lot of cities don't have that and don't carry those types of balances inside there to replace the equipment. And that's the reason why but Moody's doesn't account for that when you do theirs. But, that's no reason why we shouldn't account for it here, because we do have those funds.
Point.
My turn?
Go ahead,
Okay.
rock and roll.
All right. Well, as a fairly well-connected alderman in my district, having walked the whole district, having doing these semi-annual newsletters, and having a lot of them connected on my Block Watch group and on my email group. My phone, I had several messages when this came out in the newspaper, tax increase looming in Mequon. What the heck is going on? What's going on? This new city administrator, I'm sorry, Will, this is what they said. This new city administrator comes from Northern Illinois, now we're gonna turn into exactly what they are. And I got an earful. And then, you spend $1.5 million for this, and you're selling it for $1, and you spent this money over at the River Club. And that's what the residents are saying to me, because I'm well-connected, so I hear it. So I, sat back and read this stuff, and because I hadn't read this and seen what was in the paper yet, and tried to respond as best I could. And they said, well, I think we have some pretty good people over on the Common Council, and we'll take a look at this, and maybe we'll try and look at something more from the budgets have, revenues and expenses. And revenues, of course, we like to say revenues are taxes. Expenses, I didn't see anything anywhere in here about efficiency studies and ways to save money or become more efficient. Doing studies in businesses, they do what's called time and motion studies, and they look at, are we getting the most bang for our buck? We don't have any of that in here. Anywhere did I see, well, how can we save money? How can we save money? How can we save money? As far as this general fund goes, looking at that, I don't think that's going to affect whatsoever our borrowing rates. Alderman Nerman said, how many years would it last? Well, at $150,000 a year, if you're $2.5 million, you're looking at 15 years it would last, maybe 30 years with the other 2 million in there if we took 300,000 from there. So we got, and it, just like the mayor said, it's there to smooth the tax levy. The parks are 1,000 acres. We have 1,000 acres of parks and along with our nature preserves. We're running the deficit on that. It says 216,550 here. My residents, I guess, looked at it as a tax increase of this amount on top of what happened over at the school district. And that's going to continue because the numbers over there didn't talk at all about principal payments. That was interest payments on what that is. So we don't know where those are going. But I like to see more efficiency. I like to see more areas where we actually take a hard look at stuff. And like Alderman Hawkins said, maybe you won't like me for some of this stuff, but let's take a hard look at some of it. I do not agree at all with a quarterly newsletter. $30,000. You send it out to 10,000 residents 4 times a year. That's 40,000 pieces of mail. And we don't need it, because we can use the city website for that. We could put pieces in the news graphic identifying that we have a quarterly newsletter they can look on the website for. We have email addresses where we can tell them where to look for the quarterly newsletter. It doesn't have to be mailed. That's a lot of money, and the other thing is I don't want to see a city newsletter. I don't want to see a city newsletter. I watched what happened with the school referendum, and that money that was, those 8 mailings that I got to my house, and why should we have this referendum? It was a political piece. I would just as soon the city stay out of that area. I don't want to see this at some point in time turn into something whereby the city wants to do something, so they send out a newsletter saying how great it is, in the next quarter how great it is, and the residents who don't agree with that aren't going to spend $30,000 to combat what they don't believe. So let's just scrap the city newsletter altogether, and I'm quite adamant about that. The new city assessor, I don't know how much he's going to bring to the table. I don't know how much the old city assessor cost, but I would like to see, if there is a new city assessor, that he goes out. And I'm not going to mention which properties they are, but they're in my district, and I'm sure all of our districts have them, are these people who don't like to take out permits and like to put on additions in their house and like to do stuff. And if they do get caught at it, all they get is a double permit fee. I'd really like to see a city assessor go out there and assess the people who aren't playing by the rules. Because I do play by the rules. And I take out the permits and I pay for the stuff. So if we're going to have a city assessor, I want everybody to have to pay their fair share across the board. As far as inspections go, new inspection supervisor, if one's leaving, what is our cost savings from that one leaving? Said something that we're going to have somebody who's going to be leaving, and now we're adding somebody at $79,000. What's the cost saving? I mean, I imagine that's probably Scott Pinzer, but I'm not sure. The other point is on inspections, and I really want to see this going forward, in where we can have create some revenues, is going after these chronic offenders. We have chronic offenders over here that haven't been enforced. I know a year and a half ago we had about 30 people sitting here, including Jim Ott and Rick Bausenberger from my district, because they had the place next door that had the garbage laying all over and the junk and the piles. That stuff still isn't cleaned up. They haven't been fined. It's worse than ever. I was over there the other day, 4 junk cars out there without license plates on them. It was supposed to go to court on June 15th or July 15th, and for some reason, it didn't go. So I called up the city attorney. I said, you promised me this was going to court. Well, we got together with staff, and staff decided, we had a meeting, that they were compliant. And I said, who on staff did that? And can I see the notes from that meeting? Well, it was all verbal. We have to enforce this stuff because, you know what? The city loses credibility, and we waste a lot of money. I bet Scott Pinzer's been out there 8 times. 8 times to that property, and it's still the same way. We need to enforce these things, and we need to show people. Now, I came from Shorewood, and I didn't like Shorewood much because of the way they treated us. But you know what? They treated us all the same. Andrew Nurbin was there, too. You know, they came right down on us, and they were, but we were all treated the same, you know, and if my dad, spanked me and my brother did something wrong, I'd want him to spank him too. I don't want any special treatment, so I'd really like to see, if we're going to have inspection supervisor, to have these things actually enforced, and enforced equally across the board, and so that the residents understand that the city means business. You're not going to get special treatment, and neither is your neighbor. You're all going to be treated the same. You're all taxpayers. So, so the other thing on the little piece on I really appreciate our police department, and we talk about a dispatch supervisor, and you have to move stuff over. I know that what I like to see in these places, and I saw this in the fire department, is when people, especially in the fire department, when people don't have something to do, they fill in another area. When Connie and I were walking through, we had how was he? He did the deep research on crimes and the like, whatever that person's called over there at the police department, and he was doing filing, because he didn't have anything to work on that day. So he was doing filing, he was pitching in. I thought that was great. You know, if he had something that he had to do, he would be doing the most important stuff, and he would prioritize it. My feeling is that the residents are not gonna wanna have this type of a tax increase, and I don't care if it's 7 years or if it's 30 years. We don't need a tax increase without using part of this general fund, what it's used for. And I know that, you know, I like the people at City Hall, I like working with them, I like the aldermen. I said, but when I listen to the residents, what the heck, a tax increase? What do I get from the city besides snow plowing? We get a lot from the city, but the residents have their viewpoint. The residents have their viewpoint, and I listen to the residents, so my feeling on this is, and we don't need a community development study. I don't agree we need a community development study for $30,000. I would rather have put that toward a time and motion study to see where the efficiencies are at City Hall and where we can be more efficient at City Hall. I see businesses do this all the time. My business went from 26 workers in the last 9 years down to 6 workers. We lost no productivity. So we can do it. So anyway, that's all I have to say for now.
Should we look at all these new ideas and maybe chime in? Because I don't think some of the new initiatives are good, but some of them I don't agree with, and maybe we could cut a little bit.
Just getting back to the big picture, I guess, I don't think borrowing from the general fund is a sustainable answer long-term. And so you're kind of left with a couple of options. And so talking to the folks that I've talked to in the city here, I think there's people that understand the benefit in increasing this levy if it's 0.5%. I didn't think I would ever say that raising taxes would be a good idea, but I see what we've done to kind of not shrink every department, but really squeeze every department for as long as I've been around. And it's been fiscally responsible, but I think you get to a point at some time where it doesn't work anymore. You can squeeze only for so long, and then you have to make some tough decisions. And so if the mayor has some creative ways of coming up with the money, I'm all ears, but I think a little increase in that levy might be the answer that we may have to go to, and I will support that. I think they've done a nice job coming up with this budget. As far as the nuts and bolts, there's a lot of things I'd like to speak to. I agree with some of the folks that said the studies for $30,000. Let's talk about some of those big expenditures, and let's talk about the parks and the police department and the fire department. Let's talk about where we want to put our money. I know where the city administrator wants to put our money, and I think he's going to need to hear from us where we want to put our money. But if it's 0.5% increase, I will support that. If we can whittle that down a little bit, I'd be even happier.
Can you define 0.5%?
Well, the levy going from 3.04 to 3.51. That's what I'm saying, 0.5.
0.04 to 3.15. Yeah, so was that 3.7?
0.5 point.
No, it's 3.7% increase. 3.7.
11-cent increase.
11 cents is.
11 per thousand. Right?
Yeah.
You said you
11
can
cents
accept
per
that?
thousand, right.
You can accept that, you said?
I can.
Okay, I just want to know where we're all at. Is there a way, because I don't know, you put up on the thing, 2 pages of the new initiatives. Is that,
You have it right here in
Oh.
your binder, under proposed new initiatives. It's like a blue
okay,
piece
thank
of
you.
paper, and then it has all of the requests, and then what was actually funded.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I knew I saw it earlier, I just couldn't remember.
I would set the precedent that we're not doing this in the future.
Yeah, it is.
open any floodgates.
While you're thinking here, there's a gentleman in the audience that would like to address the committee. Mr. Eastman? If you care to do that, keep your comments as brief as possible, please.
Certainly will. Thank you for giving me the floor. As a citizen, as a taxpayer, obviously reading the news graphic and seeing a rather large increase in property tax was an eye-opener. I think it's important in city budgeting or government budgeting to be very efficient in what we spend the money on. If you look at the people like us, the people who pay the taxes, what are you looking for in government? And the most important thing is protection of your life and your health, your police department and the fire department, protecting your house, your business so it doesn't burn down. Those are critical services that everybody in the city really appreciate. There's value in that for all of us. The rest of this stuff is luxury, and this is where the problem comes in. I fully support the budget of the police and fire. In fact, I think a little bit light in this instance, because those are invaluable spent dollars. But when you look at the city budget as proposed, I'm not seeing that spirit of Act 10 that we've been dealing with for the last 3 years. Talking about squeezing departments, a 2% increase last year and a 1.7% increase this year is not squeezing. There is an county or a municipality that I'm aware of anywhere that's offering those types of incentive increases. That's not squeezing. That's off the charts high. The same thing with a 12% premium share on health insurance. There isn't anybody in Mequon anywhere who's paying a premium portion of their health insurance that's at 12%. That's almost like free. So when you're talking about squeezing these departments, we're not seeing that. What we're not seeing and addressing is the government, the city government efficient, not police and fire. We bargain with them, that's off the table. But the rest of it, the same thing with the inspector. When the market cratered in 2008, 2009, 2010, nobody lost their job. They all stayed on the payroll. And now when we're starting to see a little pulse, we want to have the third person. Well, the question is, if they could handle the explosion in the early 2000s, and all of a sudden there was nothing to do for 6 years, and all of a sudden maybe somebody's building something, I agree with the alderman that position should be almost a program revenue position where you're funded by the permits and the revenues we take in, not just adding another position to add a position because all of a sudden it's busy. So those are the types of things I think that we should be really taking a look at when we're asking the taxpayers. It's not the 11 cents per thousand. That's kind of a specious argument. That's always honest off the rich. It's only $100 per $1 million. That isn't convincing. What's convincing is the creep, where 2% 1 year, 1.75% next year. It just keeps creeping. It's not squeezing. And at the end of the day, that needs to be looked at, because the whole purpose of Act 10 was to bring government back into an efficient mode where it serves the people, and you're not just growing a government to grow. The problem in many communities like Mequon is we have it's called a weak mayoral system. We have a part-time mayor, part-time alderman, and a full-time staff. And while you govern the city, they administer the city, we pay for the city. And I think you really have to be looking at where these dollars are going. And for a lot of money, if you're taking tax dollars, and we pay them, I would like police and fire protection, and the rest of this stuff is not very important. It's a luxury. It benefits some, but not all. So when you're deliberating, please take a look at the efficiency of those dollars in the spirit of Act 10, and let's bring this government into line with others in the county and the communities surrounding us, so that we're getting our dollars. And nobody's squeezing anything with these numbers, so please look at that. I do appreciate your time and your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eastman. Okay, how do you want to proceed? No suggestion.
Well, I kind of thought maybe just because I don't agree with every single new initiative, and I don't know, and Dale said he wanted to get to that, if we shouldn't go through the new initiatives, or,
You can start with that, go ahead.
well. Obviously, there's been some talk about the newsletter. That's 10,000 of it. I used to be a strong proponent of newsletters, because whenever we say, put it out on the web, I don't think we have more than 1,800 web people. But then I was thinking, and maybe they need to watch out too, like Connie had mentioned, I forget who said, go to the library. Maybe we could put out one strong thing that says either chime in, or you can get these materials at the library or give them ways to get the information, but maybe we don't always have to put it in their pocket. You know, give them one last newsletter, just a postcard that says, get on the internet if you want to get the city news, kind of thing. Because I'm not hearing everybody supporting the newsletter that I kind of liked. I thought for 10 grand a year, but I do agree with, after seeing all the school things, it can get leaned, and I know they go through public welfare before they get sent out. Unlike our website, that's not going through public welfare anymore. I'm not convinced we need a new website. I'd like to hear what other people have to say. I know I find it fairly functional. I know we have a Chamber of Commerce to do all the, you know, fizz and bam boom. But, I mean, I think we need to discuss if we need a $20,000 redo of our website. And I totally support the police position. I agree it'd be nice if they could help with identity. And, let me get my note here. But, the inspection, I also realized, because having lived through the 2006, 2007, 2008 down, I was hoping that if we did something like that, maybe it'd be a contract position. And is that salary that you're showing, Will, does that include all the benefits?
Yes, it does.
So what's their starting salary, like 52,000 or,
For 3/4 of a year.
oh, really?
Yeah, that's a hard.
What are you gonna offer them, like, on the street? Because it seemed awfully high to me.
Well, our senior inspector is 79,000,
Salary?
yes.
I have a question
That,
on
you know,
that.
we were
That's-
barely
that-
hiring a city administrator for that 10 years ago. I mean, we never had anybody coming in at that high of a salary. That's a
Well,
huge
this is a
salary.
supervisory position who would be overseeing 2 current inspectors, and we can't hire a supervisor for less than what we're paying our senior inspector.
And none of our inspectors are qualified to be the senior, to move up?
That remains to be seen. We'd have to go through a recruitment process to determine that question.
I don't like that salary. So
I have a-
I'm having a hard time supporting that. Go ahead.
I have a question, Will. You said 79,000 was all in including benefits?
Oh, that's salary.
Okay, so what is it?
Benefits is probably gonna push it 102. I'm,
But this is for 3/4 of the year.
yes.
April 1.
This would be
We
a
have to
delayed
look at it
start.
as a yearly,
I'm not gonna look
because
it
it's
up.
gonna continue.
Agreed.
What's the, how much do you get, what is the annual with benefits?
105,704 is the number that's in your chart. That's the all-in cost for a full year.
For a full year? I was told that the lowest paid city employee, all in with benefits, was $66.12 an hour, because that's what I had to pay for an open records request. They said that's the lowest paid city employee was $66.12 an hour, all in. That's $132,000 a year, all in with benefits. Where's the discrepancy come from?
That's probably
That
overhead.
probably includes overhead.
Yeah, it's burdened.
It's salary, it's benefits, plus the overhead allocation.
So does this guy get the overhead allocation?
No.
Or is that just fixed costs don't count?
Well, it goes down for everyone because you add another employee. It's your overhead divided by your pool.
Cutting costs. You just didn't know it.
When the lights are off.
Anyway,
So
I
that's
do,
overhead on top of it? All right.
I do think that that deserves some discussion from the group, because I don't think it should just be a given.
I'd like to
And then,
speak to the inspection department, to the inspection position. During this past year, I had opportunity to observe and participate with constituents in relationship to the inspections department. We have 2 inspectors. They are run ragged in doing all of the inspections for our city, for new development, for the issues that have been raised with regard to whether or not things people are meeting our standards. When any one of those either gets sick or is on a legitimate vacation, you've got one. And we're trying to do development, folks. The development helps expand the tax base, and that helps everybody. we're really pushing development. We've got a lot of it coming, commercial and residential. That's going to need inspection on a regular basis. And when the construction is occurring, the builders and developers and plumbers and electricians don't want to wait 3 days or a week to get that inspection done. The inspection, this position will provide for somebody who, number one, is dealing with the constituents, doing the scheduling, meeting the need. I think we desperately need this position.
Well, to finish my thought about it, though, I think what I was trying to get at, if one of the two people we already have is qualified to, or we could train them, then we could take a normal inspection job of one of the two, and I would like to see it contracted out, because I don't know if we're gonna have a recession next year. And I'm sure you can use them anywhere in City Hall, I've talked to you, but I want them right there. And that way, you know, I don't know the inspection season, but I'm assuming there's a lull in certain times of the year. So we can plug them in when we need them and not if there's a service or something. I'm just trying to find a way not to be plugged into $101,000 forever, because that's what we're committing to. This is not a one-time expense. I'm not just looking for 1 year. I'm looking at the future and thinking of other ways that we could possibly do this.
I'm open to your suggestion, but let's put that aside for a second. They do need help. I had a simple foundation repair this summer. Called for inspection. Inspector came over, failed the inspection for the contractor. Go back, try and get follow-up. There's no record they even inspected my house. Contractor can't get answers. Had to come back, get a guy to come out again. The report that was written up was so sparse of any actionable detail. It didn't help anyone figure out what to do. They need help for all the reasons you said. Just my own personal experience, they desperately need it. So whether we promote someone internally, we hire a contractor to backfill him, if that works out, great. But they do need help, and it's only going to get worse. You bring a couple hundred houses online over in Central Road, it's going to be nuts. And they are having to make people wait longer than is desirable for the contractors. And that's just going to, word gets around with the developers and the contractors, and that has a way of increasing costs for people too. If they're gonna start baking that in, every time I gotta wait, they're gonna charge the residents more to do the work. It's no secret.
But it sounds like, I'm sorry. But it sounds like not only do they need help, it sounds like there's inefficiencies, and that's one of the reasons why we're
I think, yeah,
behind.
they could stand to computerize their department. I think that's one of the things we're looking at this next year is bringing in that. So that's gonna help, but they're 2,000 permits in the hole. And that's, we're not even up to date. We're
But those
2,000 permits
those
in
are
the hole.
closeouts, right?
It's like probably 3 or 4 man
Those are
months.
closeout permits, those aren't people waiting for,
Right.
Well, they're waiting for their
Those are
permits to be
closeouts.
closed out.
How long would that take to work?
Kim, how long is it gonna take to work through 2,000 permits? Come on up.
Stop and put it on the side, it's just 3 or 4 months.
Because, I mean, if we're thinking we got ebbs and flows in workflow, with 2,000 pending closeout permits,
yeah, but you
my
don't hire a
assumption,
full-time guy to do that forever and ever.
Oh, yeah, it could. I mean, and it depends on our approach. I mean, we've talked about, for 2016, requiring basically a fee at the time of your building permit to ensure that you will call in for your final inspection, and if you don't, you forfeit that fee. That's one way of controlling the continuation of this, but it will take some time to catch up on that. The issue is much larger, though, than 2,000 permits that need to be closed out. I've heard a number of things mentioned here. In addition to our, recent years of being proactive with development, that is taxing the inspections to staff. Commercial development, town center development, and central growth on the residential side will continue to tax that division. We have 2 full-time inspectors, 1 part-time inspector. We always had a chief building inspector up until 2009 because of Act 10, chose to retire. And I look at it as we took the opportunity to save some costs for the city at that time because there was a decrease in development opportunity. Going back to the early 2000s, when we were at the peak of our development, we operated with 26% more staff, including the inspections supervisor, and also with 50% more administrative staff. When we talk about contracting out that position or others in inspections, there is no other equivalent position in the city that is a contracted position. So I'm not sure I'm understanding why we would contract out that one particular position versus others that are similar in the organization. In addition, I heard us talk about the need to cover our costs. There is 2 departments in the city if you want to, in theory, look at total revenue brought in versus total expenditures in terms of the budget. There are 2 departments that could, in theory, cover their staff costs. That's community development and the recycling landfill operations. So our revenues in our department have historically have not been subsidized, or our expenses have not been subsidized by the taxpayer. We run a pretty lean operation. We are starting to see some concerns, as we mentioned in that SWOT analysis, in terms of threat. Closeout permits are one of them. We are also mandated to get out in inspections within 3 working days of a call in for an inspection. We cannot accommodate that request. That allows a contractor to move forward on their project without the inspection. That can have an impact on our state audits as well as federal audits in terms of ISO ratings. That, in theory, long-term, if that continues, can affect homeowners' insurance rates in the city. So there are some pretty large impacts to continue to operate in this manner. No doubt that technology is also a need, which is why we talked in our SWOT analysis about the need for staff and also technology. We are basically using an outdated technology system that we cannot populate, we cannot run reports anymore. So it's not just staff, but it's technology as well. And as mentioned, the quicker we can turn these permits around, whether it's commercial or residential, the quicker we're getting consumers into the city that are continuing to spend money and generating additional revenue for the community.
One question. Would you say to close a permit out is an hour's worth of staff time, travel out, inspect, come back, write up 5 minutes worth of report time?
You might be able to do 1 or 2 within an hour, and there's obviously some additional lead time in terms of contract, letter writing, calls, trying to confirm.
If it's 1 an hour, you got 2,000, you have 2 employees, 40 hours a week, take you 6 months to get through it.
Oh, I mean, yeah, we've.
Just to
If
get
they
to-
had nothing else.
If they had nothing else to do, and they do.
Yeah, and we have no one in the office other than Jack and myself throughout the office day to address any concerns that come in at the counter to help an applicant or a contractor filing a permit, any troubleshooting that needs to be done regarding the project or the inspections. And we've outsourced all of our plan reviews for the last 2 years. Our in-house staff does not do that. All of our commercial plan reviews are going to the state. That leads to a slowdown in customer service and efficiency for our customers as well.
So is that person going to do the planning reviews also?
Yes.
So what are the?
Typically, the chief inspector would be in-house all day to be able to address phone calls, customer traffic, does the prep work for architectural review boards, so checks all the residential zoning, setbacks, fence heights, all that.
Receive.
So is there a reduction in cost then for the outsourcing?
Well, there'll be a reduction in cost of overtime for our current inspectors who are generally.
You're sending them out to the state to be done, and you're outsourcing those. If he's going to be doing those, what's the cost savings that we get then?
Well, one of the contracted positions for plan review is about $4,500 a year. And the other plan review that we've executed the contract for is basically a pass-through. It's for the larger commercial development, so the cost of that service for that plan review is taken on by that particular permit holder.
Which we would save.
Well, it would just be a different cost to the customer.
But if we're already paying him,
No, we don't pay him. We pay him,
Customer
whoever filed the permit pays us
How they will
back
pay
to
us.
pay for that plan review.
How they will pay us.
That person will also be in-house to receive customer calls. Because that was one of the big concerns and
Correct.
complaints that I was receiving.
Correct.
Is that there were not people to receive the call who could answer questions about the inspection requirements.
Alderman Hawkins.
I'd like to piggyback on what Alderman Garrell said earlier. I've got a constituent who's complained about a neighbor who has been receiving citations for, he says, over 3 years. There was a court date planned for October, early October, which passed. He keeps receiving citations, but nothing happens.
Well, two things.
It's not really a budget issue.
It's not, well, it's not a
Well,
budget,
it
it's not
is.
really,
It's
it's not an
related to-
inspection staff issue. That's an enforcement officer issue, that's a completely different position, completely different job description, completely different work programming. In both of these cases, we have continued to issue citations. It is at the point that it is in municipal court, and at that point, it's out of staff's hands. There has not been any recent negotiations with either of those projects at a staff level to let go of any particular enforcement matters. These individuals choose or not choose to show up for court. They choose to plead guilty or not guilty, and it's really in the judge's hands and the attorney's hands after the fact on how to, in the best way, achieve compliance and also at least recoup some of our costs related to court. We don't necessarily recoup the costs of the enforcement officer, but again, your enforcement officer is a 20-hour contracted position that is not a staff employee.
When do the fines start? Now, I've gotten letters from the city where it says, if I don't do this within such and such a time, it's $150 and it's $300. And I haven't seen any fines for these people, and they continue to do it. And if it's just like a parent telling his kid, don't do that or else, and the
Well,
kid, that's
The fines are
problem.
the citations, and we have had discussions at Public Welfare about the timelines associated with those enforcement actions, as well as the opportunities for the fines and how often, from an administrative approach, we would issue those citations. And we do that more often with the repeat violators. But I don't think right here and now is the time to talk about enforcement deadlines or the cost of the citations.
Create some revenue if we actually started finding these people who are causing problems, and we're spending so much time inspecting again and again and again and wasting time in court. I think
Again,
sooner or
those
later
matters
we
are
have-
handled at municipal court with the judge at that point. I've lost
Yeah,
control at that
they
point.
don't pay the fine, they go to court. There was a guy with $25,000 worth of fines.
Yep.
What did he get off with? Nothing, or 5?
Chose to
or-
go to jail for weeks.
Well, he does that too.
Instead of
Yeah.
paying $25,000 of
Judges-
citation costs.
How about, let's take a look at the new initiatives budget, and go through it, department, well, it's not real hard. Start with the administrator, new city website, quarterly newsletter, and 2 staffing studies. Yes, sir.
I'm
You
gonna
have a motion?
Oh,
You're on the wrong page.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Do it.
Okay.
I'll move we eliminate the quarterly newsletter for $10,000. Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I disagree.
Now we're gonna have a vote. Call the roll.
No discussion?
Okay, discussion.
I think from a communication standpoint, as we're like nixing communication items off of the agenda, the newsletter, maybe it doesn't need to be quarterly, maybe it's a biannual thing. Maybe we have strict instructions that there's no political statements where we're trying to get people's energy behind things. But we had the coyote issue come forward before. There's no communication on that. When it comes to paying tax bills, when it comes time to voting. Again, these are all admin costs. These are all costs. These are all people that call us, the aldermen. They're all people that call staff. It goes to the expense, the overall overhead of staff. It hits at a peak time, not always when it's expected. I think from a communication standpoint, that the newsletter would be a benefit, and I'll piggyback and say further, the website is abominable that we have currently, and if we know how to negotiate our way through it to find the info, it's only because we're elected officials and we darn well better. Because we have to explain it to our constituents. It does nothing to promote our city. It does nothing to have PR. It gives nobody a reason to want to come to Mequon. And I think the newsletter, from a communication standpoint, I was shocked that it was abandoned years ago. And I don't know why we're looking at, you know, again, we got a $450,000 thing and we're picking at one that starts with 10. I think we look at a high dollar amount and start there and figure out where those expenses go and keep some communication with our residents so they're informed on what's going on in the city. So they know where to pay their tax bills. They know what's going on with sewer and water. They're aware of all these things. Instead of having staff call and use $100,000 with fringe benefit time to communicate with residents versus a newsletter that you can mail out and drop for 16 cents a piece.
We used to always put a newsletter out right before budget, before the vote in November. It was a very good newsletter. It did the pie chart and everything, and it really helped people understand the budget. And they had a chance to come to the November meeting then and speak for or against it. It was a good tool that way. I just, part of me wants to cut it just to be, because I really do want to cut down on these taxes, but I will be honest, I've been advocating that newsletter for 3 years now. Because my mother, for example, there's a lot of people that don't have computers. And there's no way they can know, and they've been taxpayers since the 50s. So at this point, I think I'm going to support you, but if we get to the point of really having to cut budget later.
I'm a skeptic. I don't think the general population here goes through the newsletter, ever. I think if you asked everybody in the room to raise their hand, whoever read that newsletter in the last 6 months, I think you might be surprised.
Well, we haven't had
We
one
haven't
out
had it in
for
a couple
about
of
6
years,
years.
So you're right.
The newsletter on the website that pops up, do you read that?
No, but when it comes to my house, I have a chance to sit down with my wife who's, we're a dual income house. We sit down and we talk, but we don't sit down and with a laptop and go over something on a website. Hey, did you read this newsletter? Look at this article right here. It's a communication tool. And if you look at Google, which is the biggest company in the world, how do they get more customers? They send out direct mail.
They do?
Yes.
I never got
You want to get your site verified. They don't email you. They send you a card, or they call you on the phone
As a business,
as a business.
You're on your
because they're not,
It's not looking for new business, though.
let's take a
Well, we have a
vote.
motion and a second, let's call the roll.
It's a communication.
Alderman
tool.
Bouquet?
Oh, can we just raise hands, or?
I didn't get to even argue myself.
Alderman Meyer?
Is a no to remove it, or is a, what is?
Yes to remove it.
Yes,
No is to remove it?
A yes is to remove it.
If you vote yes, say yes, you want to cut it.
No.
Are we gonna
Alderman Lozinski?
are we gonna go through every one of these?
We should just raise hands and do straw votes.
All right, raise your hand if you want to remove the newsletter.
Oh, boy, it's tight.
4?
Fails.
4,
Five.
5?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
The problem with this
you gotta
is,
put your hand back.
for what?
Motion
It's
passes.
easier to
it's
call
up.
names. Sorry.
You're not
So
getting a
it's
lot of, we're getting Rob's
Right.
feedback, but I'm
We're gonna
not
have a
getting
tough time if we
feedback
can't
from
come
anybody
find
else
I
who
know.
might have
Alright,
something
Get
of
feedback
substance.
from the people who read news graphic articles.
That passes.
I'll make another motion to remove the 2 staffing analysis. Both of them.
I'll second.
Any discussion? That's it for
I
page.
think it's
That's it
good
for page
I think
one.
it's a good motion. You got supervisors who can tell you what's going on in their departments.
You're
Wait,
talking
we're
about
not to that,
C&D.
we're talking about the staff studies.
C and D.
C and D.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's vote.
Yep.
All right. All in favor of removing C and D, raise your hand. Second majority.
Is that a
Majority.
Andy, oops, hand up, that's
No.
8 to 1.
Page 2. Police Department? Anybody? Communications,
Wait.
new position? Anybody?
$300.
Building inspections,
Oh, wait, I can't follow along. Are you on another page than me?
page 2. Page 2 has
Okay, police, okay.
risk management for police department and 2 new positions.
Yeah.
Which ones are they?
Wait, the police has one new position.
Yep, and they're asking for Lexipol, which is a risk management policy development.
Right.
contract.
Yeah, $8,300 under police, communications has a new position, and inspections has a new position.
It's a pretty,
So highlight
I just can't
committee.
believe how high these salaries, so the salary for the patrol
You're talking
officer?
just in police,
Wait,
right?
I'm confused now.
Police, okay.
Just to recap,
Communications position is, define that again.
the all-in cost on salary and benefits is included on the chart. For the telecommunications supervisor, it's $77,713
Okay, that's what I
for a
thought.
full year. And the chief inspector would be, or the inspection supervisor's $105,704 for the full year. We're recommending that both of those positions be filled as of April 1st. The numbers you see on the far right-hand column are the pro rata share of those full-on annual costs.
Wait, okay, I'm sorry. These new initiatives have been presented in so many different forms. There's only 2 new positions we're talking about. One is for community development, and one is for the police for like an administrative position.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, we're done with new initiatives.
What about, we weren't gonna question the community, wasn't there a 30,000, oh, that was part of it that we got, okay, forget it. For community development, we got rid of that study, okay, good. So it was underneath the administrative, gotcha.
Okay, one of the other easy charts to look at is capital budget. Capital budget. It's one page, total of $833,000.
Wait, we gotta find,
Capital budget's from the beginning.
capital projects?
Yep.
Which one is?
Okay, thank you. I didn't see it folding out the first time I went to it.
The last column with numbers in it is what the city administrator is recommending.
Where did we pull it out from?
If you go to like the red, pinkish red tab, it
Yeah?
says
Here,
capital projects,
Mark, let me help you.
pass that
This is
tab,
There we
capital
go.
project,
and then
and
open it up.
tab, and
This
then
one.
open
Thank
it.
you.
I know you've been, well, yours is already highlighted, you know where that was. You've been working.
Cut all kinds of stuff out of here.
Connie, when you start adding,
First question is, what was last year's request for equipment replacement for Public Works? Do you
Their
have that?
request last year,
Last year, what was the requested or given amount?
they got to,
420, I think we funded 260.
yeah, we funded 260.
Funded 260 on it. Okay.
What's included in those again?
Equipment replacement?
This is just overall.
Trucks,
All
equipment?
of their equipment, they do their own analysis based on the funding level that they receive for the worst pieces of equipment that need to be replaced. Correct?
The CIP for the equipment replacement goes in the whole fleet, and so we may carry, the intent is to carry a balance from 1 year's equipment, so when we pick a more expensive piece of equipment, we don't have to ask for an increase, but we've been typically funded at a quarter to a third of our.
Well, I would move that, as long as you're on that one, I'd move that back to 260, a reduction of 40,000.
Which line?
Equipment replacement under Public Works.
Yeah.
Second that.
Motion and a second. You understand?
Flat,
Pardon?
flat line from previous.
Right. We're gonna get a new building.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Essentially to maintain the fund
those in favor, raise your hand.
Unanimous.
We got a majority. I'm on a roll. See, I got $250,000 worth of cuts if you just want
Bike
to let me
lane
do 'em.
construction.
What?
Bike lane construction.
Who?
Bike lane construction.
Why is that a separate line?
12014.
I wanted to talk about this Emerald Ash Board.
That's, Lake
Yeah.
Lane Construction is what they do when they do the rest of the
Okay,
road.
we'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
Anything else under Public Works? I would remove 50,000 from urban forestry.
Public Works has got the Emerald Ash Board if you wanted to talk
Yeah,
about it.
yeah. You're gonna take 50,000 out of that?
I would take 50.
Second.
Motion is second. to
Is this
take
Emerald
50.
Ash Borer?
That's cutting down the ash trees, right, that are gonna fall down any year now.
Well, I would like to have a discussion on that one.
Is that what, I think discuss what our liability is?
Exactly. We have a high liability with the ash trees. I had ash trees taken down in front of my house and had conversation with the person who was hired under contract to do that. He indicated that once the trees really start losing their leaves, which if you've been driving around our city this summer, you've got to be seeing the number of trees that are dying, that last year didn't look like they were dying. But he said once they start losing their leaves, they become very brittle. And that when they become brittle, it becomes dangerous for the people who are cutting the trees. Becomes dangerous for anybody if the trees aren't cut down. They start breaking apart very.
Well, they collapse.
And you've got liability.
I was talking to the forest rangers up at River Edge Park several months ago because I have an ash tree in my backyard, and they recommended a product out of Home Depot, and my tree thrived this year. But for the city policy, I think we need to spend this money because those trees, when they die, will just collapse. So if it comes on to, that's where Alderman Bouquet, his comment is correct. The liability that we have is pretty high.
We've got to get a head start on this. I mean, how many
We've got
trees,
thousands.
ash trees in the public way?
We have 27,000 publicly owned ash trees in Lake Cannon, 44,000.
We spent,
$3 a tree.
we spent $40,000 on this year. What did the 40,000 go for?
It removed 102 trees, but it did not replace any trees.
It's basically, we need to
$2,500 a tree?
do it right.
To remove, stump, restore, yes.
So what do you,
good
so,
business.
so you cut down these trees, and then, what do you do with the wood from them?
I'm sorry?
What do you do with the wood from the trees?
If we remove the trees, we would sell it.
You got
And
$3 a
if
tree for the rest of
contractor removes the trees, it's their prerogative to either.
27,000 trees.
So you sell the wood?
You average 2,500 a tree now, you gotta bring it down to $3 a tree. There's efficiencies there somewhere.
Because about a year ago, when I first, my neighbor cut down a bunch of trees, and the wood was laying over there, and I called Bruce Barnes, and I said, hey, you got a bunch of wood over there. Can I have that wood? And he said, sure, you'll save the city a lot of money if you take it out over the weekend. So Monday, because Monday they're gonna come out with a big crew, and they're gonna load it all up in a truck, bring it to the dump, and then the residents can go pick it up from the dump next spring. And I said, I'll save the city a bunch of money, because I'll burn that wood this winter in my wood burner. So I saved the thing, and I went to Alderman,
And we've talked about that at Public Works, and unfortunately, we don't have the staff to administratively sell the wood ourselves. So we would just sell it by the lot to, it has to be a deck cap certified contractor because they have to indicate that they will meet all of the quarantine requirements because we have emerald ash borer. So it is infected and we cannot just outright sell the wood. We would either have to quarantine it for 2 years or otherwise address it before we would be able to sell it. And with 27,000 trees, we have.
It's a complicated world we live in.
so the guy can, so the residents can't just take it. or a neighbor couldn't just take it. So you didn't have to load it up with all of the city hour work and haul it over to wherever you
Well,
hauled it.
the biggest issue with that is we typically, if we leave wood, then people don't take it, and now we've gotten 2 trips out of it to come back and collect the wood that's on the side of the lot. We just haul the wood because we left wood on the side of the road.
I think
Well,
the
that's-
issue before us is, do we spend $75,000 to start removing some of the 27,000 trees?
Can I
We,
ask, because there's a number out there, if we got rid of all of them, I know I've seen that number.
We have the numbers for just the inventoried street trees, which is not all of the street trees, it's just the street trees.
And the cost to get rid of all of them
Is
eventually?
3.8 million.
See, this problem is just a drop in the bucket.
We're not gonna pay 3.8.
The issue on this, Alderman Bouquet, is that I was asking a question when you interrupted. I wanted to see if there's a way we could save some money. So that was where my questioning was leading. It wasn't just we move on and let's vote on this. So I would like to see ways where we could actually cut costs.
We do actively pursue that. We actively pursue either through a contract that they would dispose of the wood, which results for us in a decrease in the cost to remove the trees if they're allowed to take the wood and sell them as they have it. Whereas if the wood is in our possession, we have the ability to sell that either to a DACAP certified contractor or in theory to quarantine it, but we don't have the space to do that.
Total cost to remove all of them was 3.8 million.
No, the total to remove the inventoried street trees, which includes no parks, no arterial roads, nothing that wasn't in the original Davies tree survey. Only those that were originally inventoried at 3.8 just to remove. That assumes that we would not replace a single tree. And at the discussion, I believe it was in March, that we had a goal of a 1-to-1 tree replacement, not 1-to-1 diameter.
Never gonna get in
just
front of this one
1-to-1
though.
tree.
No.
This is a dead thing.
That's 50 years at this funding level. Well, 50.66 years.
That's to take down a standing tree, correct?
Correct. It will get progressively more expensive if we don't take down a tree while it's live, because they essentially disintegrate when we try and remove it. And so, the cost of removing dead ash trees will be significantly
But if it falls
higher.
down, it's relatively cheap.
Well, if it falls down, it might fall on something
Or somebody.
in the road.
Insurance
And if
is
it's,
fine.
well, if it's in our road right of way,
Can we get ahead of this, like Alderman Hawkins said, can we get ahead of this by having some type of a vaccination of the trees that are out there that are still good?
You could have 7 years ago when it was originally recommended, but at this point, now that the infestation is in place, there's no way to be able to keep up or know which trees are infected unless they're already showing signs of dying, at which point it's too late to treat. Or treating what is potentially a dying tree and wasting the money on the treatment that could be spent on.
And honestly, even if we were ahead of the game, I remember the tree boards had figures before us like 3 years ago, when we thought we were ahead of the game.
Right.
And these were the experts, this is Carrie Mattingly and Leafland and, and they said it was a lot more to start treating, because you have to treat them like every other year. And to treat all the trees, you can treat a few special ones,
And we did
but
treat
for the whole
that-
community, it would've been more than cutting them down.
Okay,
Because it goes and goes and goes.
the reasoning here is we spent 40,000 on it this year, leaving us 25,000, and so if you take 50 out, we have 25, we have another 25, we'll have 50,000 to spend next year.
The fund balance, though, just as a note in defense of the tree board, the fund balance is actually the escrow that's paid in when people remove specimen trees and don't replace them. It's the same fund. So a lot of that money has been designated by the tree board, for example, for the Concordia replacement.
We didn't pay 'em.
All those trees, rather than replace them, they paid it into the fund. So in the absence of funds this year, we used that money to be able to fund the start of the EAV program. So that $25,000 balance in there was previously designated for specimen tree replacement as mandated by the Planning Commission and the tree board.
And the tree board had hoped to use that money because Concordia chose, we didn't have a choice when they took down all these 55 specimen trees for the garage. They had a landscaping plan on Lakeshore Drive, was beautiful, it would have covered the neighbors from future development, all kinds of things, but at the last minute, they decided to give the money instead, we didn't have the choice. And the tree board was kind of hoping to use some of that money to do some of that for the neighbors, but I guess we can't do it.
And the intent through the EAB tree replacement would still be to achieve that. It doesn't necessarily mean where we remove an ash tree, we will replace an ash tree. We'll still look at the city's overall goals in terms of the tree canopy and diversification and make sure we're accomplishing the goals of the tree.
And as the chair of the tree board, I guess I know where I have to vote on this. I'll get killed at the next meeting.
All right, if you support removing $50,000 from the EAP program, raise your hand. But you
Try.
get three?
Wait, Andrew, is your hand up too?
Doesn't matter, motion fails.
You're just scratching something.
I saw four.
Bike lane. Move to remove.
We're at Parks
That's
next.
under engineering.
Raise my hand.
Who raised your hand, just you three?
I raised my hand.
Just you, Dale?
Everybody else thinks that $75,000 gonna make them.
Where's, oh, bike lane. 25,000 on bike lanes.
Right.
Okay. Want to remove that?
Move to
What does that
remove.
go to?
Pays for bike lanes when we repave a road.
No. Does it?
Or any, it's the only funding for pedestrian and bike facilities.
I think we'll just abandon the committee that has no funds to do anything. But I sit on and take work time to go sit it. I mean, it's just, it's 25 grand.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but you
Why
make
don't we
me
include
laugh.
that in the, when we're doing the road project? I mean,
Yeah, can't
Yeah.
that be part of the capital
to do
bond?
that.
Well, it is discussed, but that's only then if
Bike
it
lane
would be proposed as part of the road program. Whenever we do the analysis in terms of whether a road should be widened or not, we give Public Works the option as to whether they do it. But a lot of this money for bike lane construction would be in locations where either the road doesn't need to be reconstructed or there's a requirement for an off-road.
I
Aren't
don't-
we,
then
aren't
I
we
don't
required for
support
the
it.
state to do certain roads to have that on there?
Well, Trans 75 was part
good
of
if she sat at the
what,
table.
is subject to interpretation now with the state budget. And the only mandate we would ever have to provide bike or pedestrian facilities would be if there's state or federal funding involved.
You know, the best bike lanes in my time on the bikeway committee for years, which you didn't know about, was the better bikeway is truly the one attached to the road because it gets maintained while the road's being maintained. The ones that you add after the fact to a road, they just don't hold up right. And I don't know if I like separate paths. I don't think that's the way the bikeway committee's going. They're going with roads. So I could support taking that out.
And we have,
As long as we have them on the main roads when they're put in.
we'd still have $34,000 in that account.
Yeah.
That looks more like a maintenance number to me than it does a construction number, because I remember hearing quotes for bike lane construction off of Donjas Bay Road, and one was on the road and it was $180,000 for a mile, and it was off the road, it was $250,000, and it was a mile stretch. It wasn't like a 6-mile long path or anything. It was very, very expensive construction
Correct.
project.
The-
And so when I see $25,000, I look at that and I go, that would be a maintenance number.
The most recent project that utilized the funding from the bike lane construction budget was the relocation of the OIT around the substation. And we were fortunate enough to get the grant for that, but the overall project cost in the absence of the grant was well over $300,000.
What are we proposing?
And I don't support off-road bike lanes. I like them when you're doing roads, which is why I cannot.
What are we proposing?
And
to
that just
construct?
as Alderman Strelchuk can speak to, unfortunately, that's often contrary to the 2030 plan that the Bikeway Commission has.
So there's a grand
So-
plan.
Are you saying that $25,000 wouldn't do anything?
No, actually, well, our funding request was $100,000, so.
It's the equivalent of a long driveway. Look at it, to put a long driveway in from scratch.
Can I ask, is there any specifics as far as the $100,000 proposal was for a bike lane where? I mean,
Yeah,
the Mequon Thiensville Joint Pedestrian and Bikeway Commission has a document that they have that's their 2030 plan that has a list of priorities based upon their goals and objectives in terms of where the money would be spent. And so the number one priority was the relocation of the OIT around the substation.
That's
But
done.
since that essentially wiped the account, you know, down to limited funds, they have to look at their next priorities and determine how many years they'll have to save in order to be able to accomplish the next one. And then as we go through, depending on whether or not any of these are accomplished with the road program, then they have to look at expending some of the funds potentially when they're added. The Donjas Bay Road bike lanes that went on this year went just on east of the railroad tracks also paid for. The lanes themselves that were added was paid out of this one.
Why can't that be paid for out of the road borrowing that we're doing?
It's not necessarily that it hasn't, or that it can't be, it's that the Public Works Committee has opted to spend that on roads and not on bike facilities.
Well, the bikeways, we just put in the 4-lane roads when we do roads, and it's part of a major plan, as you say.
But we don't do it on all roads.
But the bikeway plan knows what roads to do it on.
Right, but more typically, they're proposing off-road paths than bike lanes.
See-
They find that residents prefer to be able to take their families and things on safer routes outside of the
And
vehicular
then they have to
traffic.
get all the extra right-of-ways.
Well, in some locations, we have sufficient right-of-way to be able to put those in.
Is the item before us for $25,000 to add to a designated fund for the?
Right, we already have an account, and so it would be added to that account. And then, again, typically, when we hit a balance that's sufficient to
That helps
complete the
build
next
up the
project.
fund to a point where you could do something.
Correct.
Okay. No, thank you.
I think it'd be nice to see the committee actually have a budget. You know, and sitting in a committee meeting, they wanted to add, I think, what was it, 8 signs, Don? I don't know if Don's still-
15.
So they wanted to add 15 signs to highlight that there was a bike passage thoroughfare where there wasn't vehicular traffic that could get through. And, you know, as we're making an effort as a city to be a bike-friendly community, it's bike-friendly, this is your kids riding to and from. This is your kids getting from point A to point B. And a lot of kids aren't riding their bikes because the roads are just flat out unsafe in some areas. There's no shoulder. I mean, I live up by Green Bay Road. There is no shoulder. And the shoulder that there is cracked. And I'm an experienced off-road cyclist, and I ended up off-road, not intentionally, because of the shoulder of that road. I think some budget for the bike committee is a benefit to the community. You know, again, as we're looking at this, you know, this is something that goes towards safety, it goes towards communication on where this is. And I would like to see, in my personal opinion, that bike lane construction be mostly under the budget of the highway. However, I'd like to see some of that allocation to the bike committee so they can do some of the initiatives that they sit every month and talk about.
Well, and you're right, and just to clarify, at
Eco
whatever
friendly.
amount that it would be funded, because it's designated for bike lane construction, it would not cover things like the request for additional signs.
Can we vote?
You know,
All those in favor of removing bike lane appropriation for 25,000, raise your hand.
5.
huh? Can I do it? I'd like to make a motion to add 10,000 back in to the bike committee so that they actually have something to work with this year. And it doesn't go to just the off-road paving.
Second.
Let's vote, because we've already talked it through.
Assuming that this
All those in favor of putting $10,000 back, raise your hand.
saving 2, 3,
5. 10,000 back.
Thank you. children in the community. Thank you.
Okay.
Sure, everybody in Newcastle Place.
Pets First Neighborhoods is what helps them.
Sarah
That's the only
Chanel,
safe way.
new memory care facility over here.
They have anything else for me?
Moving down the list, is there anything anybody identifies?
Is the rec.
Um,
But yes, they took
I have
out
a question on police vehicle replacement, you know.
Okay.
I brought this up, I think, when it was on finance, and, you know, we're looking, you know, we're in fiscally lean times, we're looking at vehicle replacement. I don't doubt that it needs to be done, I'm not questioning that fact in my statement. But I am questioning the statement item that it's an SUV versus an Impala for the fuel efficiency that goes along with those vehicles. They're a larger size vehicle, and they're more expensive and an ongoing replacement issue. I would generally like to know if there's a more cost-effective vehicle for the replacement. I know Summer Subaru donated a Subaru to the police department. If any of those can be retrofit. I know Ford has retrofit vehicles. I'm generally questioning that.
Can't catch anybody, though.
Yeah, it can. Yeah.
That Subaru is like a show car. It's really small. I barely fit in it. It's not intended to be a 24-hour-a-day car for use. That was more of a promotional thing and recruiting and that type of vehicle. So that's not, they're not even police certified.
It's a goodwill.
Yeah, as far as replacing with SUVs, we've had the Chevy Impala for, I don't know, 15 years. And we've been able to use the same cages and seats and everything from the old cars put into the new one. They're gonna stop making that car available for police use later this year. So we've looked at other cars, other vehicles. We're not going to SUVs because they're cool or whatever, because we want to. We're running out of room in the cars that we have with all of the equipment we have in there. We can't fit training officers in the front seat with the computers and other things we have in there. They're all-wheel drive. They're more spacious. The engines they're making these days are more fuel efficient. We're not losing anything there. I think it was mentioned earlier about Tahoes. We're not looking at Tahoes. We're looking at Ford Explorers. Some of the other cars out there are maybe a little less, but they won't suit us any better as far as all the equipment and things we have to have in there, so.
Very, manufacturers are really limiting that now to what's the availability for it. Because it's just a special line that they build for it. It's just not cost effective even to build the cars for the municipalities on it now.
And the chief mentioned earlier, I mean, your officers are gonna be more comfortable getting in and out. It's a lot easier, you know.
Yeah, there's
to do their
definitely
job
more
with.
space in there.
Yeah.
How many vehicles do you replace, 10?
We would do 8.
8? I guess the only comment I would have is 208,000, 150, 358,000. To replace those vehicles, that seems like more than enough. And then you consider that there's already nearly $600,000 in the equipment replacement fund.
We did an analysis of how many vehicles they have to replace, what their all-in cost for the vehicles would be with the equipment in the vehicles. And we actually did a schedule when we worked on this number. And at the $150,000 being put into their account in 2016 with what's already in there, they will be down to about $25,000 after they've replaced all 8 vehicles and all of the equipment in those vehicles, including the cameras, the roll cages, the light bars, the seats. I feel like I'm forgetting stuff, but that number is gonna be to 25,000. Then they have to build it back up to replace any additional equipment that they have, from the department. And that 25,000 is also a good cushion in case there's any incidents with those vehicles. Usually if there's an accident in one of our cars, if someone hits us or if something gets damaged, we do submit an insurance claim for it, but we do have to pay it out on the front end and then we get reimbursed on the back end. And depending on what the situation is, we might not get 100% reimbursement.
So we're doing all 8 at once, is that it then?
Yeah,
Why?
because that's when they all have about 100,000 miles on and are not really safe anymore as far
Kind of
as.
going in the same sequence, because I thought you kind of got some one year, some another year, some another year, some another year, and they kind of, leapfrogged each other. And
No, with the marked, we're talking about the marked squads here, not unmarked or special use. We do the marked ones all together.
you always have.
Yeah.
Okay.
They did replace unmarked vehicles this year, as well as, I believe you got a new chief's vehicle to replace your old one.
Well, those are
Right.
the unmarked.
Right,
We
so
cycle them
those are
down.
an off schedule.
I was just
from each
curious.
Yeah.
How many miles a year do you put on one of those?
Roughly 25 to 30.
I
Or more than that. We keep them about we used to do about every 2 years. We've increased that to every 2.5 years that we replace them, so it's actually a little more than that. But we usually get rid of them around 100,000. That's when we start seeing the mechanical problems and safety issues and things like that, so they're used 24/7. These are 100,000 hard miles. They're not like personal miles.
Is there any reason to think these might last a little longer than the normal cars you've been having, just because it's a different type?
They might. They really haven't been used a whole lot. Ford used to make the Crown Victoria, which was the most popular police vehicle, and they stopped making that a couple years ago. So right now, we're only a couple years into police departments having been using these a lot, so
We don't have a fact.
we don't know yet.
The reason I bring that up is I typically buy my cars at 100,000 miles these days. They go to.
So you want to buy an old squad car? Is that what you're
250, they go to 250, 300. It's not like they wear out right away. I buy them at 100,000. I don't have problems with them.
These aren't little old lady miles to church on Sunday miles. They're hard driven. They idle a lot. They, fast acceleration, hard braking, things like that when we get into pursuits.
Maybe they should
They're-
go to
these are hard
driver's ed
miles,
school,
these cars.
learn to drive safe.
It should also be noted that the old police vehicles do sometimes get purchased to like the Public Works Department and inspections for use as vehicles that aren't as hard driven. For example, the inspectors will go out to do inspection in those vehicles. The Public Works Department just actually took a Tahoe from the police department that they're using for building maintenance now, so they have more room for equipment and things like that in those vehicles. So we do prolong some of the life of those vehicles.
And there's no advantage to getting 4 new Impalas and 4 Explorers this year and keeping the retrofit, trying the Explorers and seeing how it goes and then
Well,
replacing them differently.
I mean, we'd be getting rid of those Impalas with less than 100,000 miles, and I think you'd be questioning me on getting rid of them too soon. We're trying to
But how much is a
standardize it
retrofit?
as well as get our officers more comfortable. They're very cramped in those cars. All of the equipment we have to get into the trunks, they're making everything smaller and differently, and it's a difficult situation.
The officers getting into these vehicles with all of their equipment, to watch them do that, you recognize very quickly that the vehicles we have are uncomfortable, and going to anything else isn't going to help us. And certainly,
I'm just looking at the budget item as we're going through in $10,000 increments. Just, again, the retrofit is the big concern I think that I was mainly looking at. I mean, you gotta not only buy the vehicles, but you gotta get all the equipment for the new vehicles. And if the savings on the retrofit on 4 vehicles would be more advantageous this year to get Impalas earlier before they're done with 100,000, you might get a little more value for those. There might be some ROI and some savings in that. You'd have 4 vehicles on, that'd be available on the street, 24/7 or whatever. And then you can go to the Impalas as a backup vehicle, if necessary. That's just, again, it's a line of questioning, making sure that's fiscally responsible and we're being real wise with those funds. I don't doubt that you need quality vehicles, and I support you having them. It's just it's a cost thing. The retrofit that's the hard part.
We will see the savings from the retrofit the next time they replace the vehicles, because then we can take all the equipment from the ones that they're getting next year and put it into those vehicles the next time that it's time to replace. So we do see that drop at least. So we just have to basically buy on the front end like we did for the Impalas, and then we see the savings on the back end when we strip the old vehicles and put it into the new ones, and it continues going down with the SUV line.
All right, that's it for capital.
Can I ask while the chief is here? We went over the vehicles. There's about $100,000 that you requested, some of which you have a pretty decent balance on, some of which I don't know if it's still, relevant that you're asking for or not, but there's weapons replacement. There's a balance of $25,000. I know that we just replaced a lot of assault weapons.
They didn't come yet, so that 16,000, 17,000 for the rifles is
That's coming out of the 25?
not out of there yet.
Okay, so then you really only have 10, and you're asking for another 10, but altogether, it seems like the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
But it's not been recommended by the administrator.
Right. And my question was on the mobile data terminals, the portable mobile radios. Is there something going on with that right now that we need to know about before the 2016 budget pops up?
Well, with the portable and mobile radios, portable radios are the ones that we have on our hips. The mobile radios are the ones in the squads. The county owns the radio system, and they're looking at upgrading and changing that system. And we're kind of in a holding pattern for when they decide to act on that. So the money that we have sitting there will cover whatever brand or whatever type of radio system they go to. We're gonna have to replace our radios. They own the backbone, they maintain it. We're gonna need radios that fit with that system. So we've been putting money away for that. It's gonna be a big expense.
This has been going on for like 3 years, hasn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
who's gonna take over the overall, the terminal? Who's gonna control it? The county, the city, a cooperative venture between different entities? Is there
Well,
been?
they own the radio system. They always have. We would have to match our radios 1-to-1 on what would fit on that system. Or we'd be looking at millions of dollars to go on our own system.
So that isn't gonna happen.
I think they're thinking 911. We got our own now.
And the mobile data terminals are the computers that we have in our squads. They're not like your typical laptop. They have to be ruggedized and be able to take being bounced around in the cars and taken in and out of cars sometimes. So they're more than just a regular laptop. And we have about 14 of those, so add a few thousand to crack or more, that money gets eaten up pretty quickly. We're another year or so away from replacing those, so I was just trying to build that up. So when the time comes for that replacement, we have the money.
You guys aren't big budget cutters, are you?
Well, I have a little
Well, I
point.
mean, I thought you were going through them
No.
section at a time, so.
No.
I have a little question.
That's too much.
Are we totally switching off of this now? Are we shutting this page?
Well, those are the big items that you could actually,
Because I got a little item I might ask about.
okay.
Is it worth it? I'm just
maybe
curious,
I'm-
Will, how much are we spending, well, first of all, as you know, we now are a festival city, because we're doing our own festival. And I know that we're lighting the trees up in front of City Hall, and I'm not sure that ever went through committee, but I think we're putting out about $5,000 a year to light up the trees in front of City Hall, because we're going with professional service, not our DPW workers. First, I'd like to know why we can't have our DPW workers do that and save some money. I mean, I know in the beginning they didn't have, understand all the right ways to plug them in and things, but I think from watching the professionals. And then I'm gonna link this a little bit to Family Fund before the 4th. How much are we giving for fireworks? Is it 10 or 12,000?
10,000.
Well, and I know we've been doing that historically, but I also know now we have our own things that we can put money towards with the festival committee. You know, because we're going out knocking on doors, you know, raising 12,000 a year for just the Taste of Mequon, you know, and we're doing a lot of work. And I would like to just say, maybe we should cut 5,000 out for the fireworks and put it towards our own Christmas lights. I mean, you know,
Well, just to respond, 10,000 on the fireworks, and my understanding is that's been kind of a constant historical.
well, I think we were at like 5 and then we upped it to 10, maybe 10 years ago.
Haven't been here long enough to
Yeah.
truly comment on that. But with respect to the holiday lighting, I've been told that last year we spent 10,000 on the holiday lighting, and this year we're including 8,000 in the budget. And I have not seen the holiday lights since I've come aboard, and so I'll be looking at that process. And my understanding is we outsourced that last year to a company that came in and did it, and we're hoping to do it for a little less this year.
I think we should do it for a lot less and still make it happen with our own people. I mean, I don't know, have you all seen the holiday lighting? Is that worth the 10 grand in front of City Hall for you? Or, I mean, I think there's a way we could do it for half that price and have our own workers put it up.
Well, we're talking about next year's budget and budgeting the money. I don't know that we've budgeted anything for the holiday lighting this year,
Oh,
so
well, then we'll be in trouble. Okay.
we may have to absorb that cost in-house or look at.
We have the lights.
And you know, I'm just saying about the fireworks, I would rather see that money goes towards, you know, cut it in half, putting it towards our festivals now. And I do think Family Fund before the 4th, as we go out and knock on doors, could easily find someone to fill that gap in by knocking on doors with corporate sponsors. Anyway, I just bring that up because I'd rather see half of that money go back towards our new city things that weren't in place when we made that commitment.
I think we should do 5,000, and with the caveat, we'll do 5,000 more if we can throw candy.
Yes. $5,000 candy prize.
Second.
Second, third.
Make the insurance happen.
I guess along the lines of festivals.
Well, we still have to budget 10,000, so we're not really changing the budget.
I do think we
That's
need
a policy issue.
Well, I just tried to get 5,000 out of it.
it's out here.
Okay, well, make a
The
motion.
electrical in the long term. I see it again
I'll be
here.
almost,
struck
I'll be
out.
Scrooge.
Even if we pay for it out of
Yeah.
unaccounted,
Bring it up, and it's gonna be Scrooge.
general fund balance. We should, like, sometime in the near future, get rid of all the generators and the shoddy makeshift electrical setup out there. Especially as we look to hopefully grow that event.
Well, I can say we certainly have our eye on it, but within the hierarchy of needs, it didn't quite make the cut this year.
I'm not questioning that. But that to me would be, if we have fund balance, it's where you do your most of things.
One-time
Waste of-
capital improvement.
One-time capital
Yes.
improvement, that's like,
That's an
fund
appropriate,
balance. that if there ever was.
excellent use of excess fund balance.
Hey, there was a motion and a second on the candy deal, you know.
All right.
But
Candy
this
deal,
area
raise
was
your hand if
designed
you
for
agree.
stuff like that.
Okay.
What are we voting on?
Candy.
Agree with,
Oh, with-
withdraw five
with
if
Dale,
we-
yeah, right.
but put it back and then also throw candy.
Right.
Hey, that's official.
Important. That's important.
We'll
We'll
take our
explain it.
choice.
It'll be a headline in the paper.
That'd be a headline in the paper, yeah.
We're gonna throw candy at our own parade.
mayor,
They won't let us throw candy ever at Family
I would-
Fund.
We're gonna
before.
name in the
Kick it.
paper
Yeah.
for something.
If we wanna throw
Besides
candy.
coyote.
And 5 and then 5 of you are gonna.
It goes through Thiensville Street, so Thiensville's insurance.
No,
Can
it's
you-
Family Fund before the 4th is a separate identity.
Yeah.
It's a,
It's a
It's
combined
not an
effort.
insurance issue, it's, they don't want us to do it.
Can And you explained the contingency budget of $112,000 in the administrator's account.
Thanks, Bob.
Yes. Last year, 150,000 was budgeted in the contingency to account for salary adjustments that were applied across the board, Tom?
Salary adjustments and a little bit of if something bad happens. So when we have a bad winter or
Hiring a
something
new
like
city
that.
administrator.
That was a good thing though, right?
Well, yeah, but
Okay.
That's a good
So-
example, yes.
that was not, yeah.
He's not here.
That was not one of the bad things.
Okay.
This year, we've allocated $85,000 for the non-union salary adjustments that are proposed in the budget. Again, that's a 1.75% cost of living adjustment for non-union. And then there's some additional money, I think $27,000, which is budgeted for addressing a couple of positions that were identified in the class and comp study that was completed back in 2014, that then came before the Finance and Personnel Committee, and that have been identified for potential further adjustment based on market review. So we're looking to address that here in 2016, again, along the theme of right-sizing, addressing those issues that have been kind of hanging fire.
Alderman Meyer.
Can somebody, I probably know what it is, but can somebody tell me what, under the mayor and common council budget, the $3,000 that just says Cedarburg is?
Yeah. How about the ones for memberships?
I don't know, I think
sorry.
that's the city,
That is a bill we get from the city of Cedarburg every year to patrol, if you will, was part of an intercity governmental agreement to patrol some businesses on Pioneer Road.
The ice arena?
I believe so, and maybe one other parcel. So we get a bill from the
is that a
city.
common council budget?
I guess that's been the history. I don't know the exact details of how that went down. I think that was part of the part of the process of getting that ice arena approved in Mequon. Was an understanding that the city of Cedarburg would recover those costs.
That's because they give us sewer? Because we could stop paying their policemen, but it's because they gave us the sewer. Municipal bribery.
What's that membership number for? Like $9,000 or $11,000?
That's the League of Municipalities charge. Our membership in the League of Wisconsin Municipalities.
Good old city.
We've debated that in the past, I
Well, I'm
think.
curious what that is. It's our membership to the League of Municipalities, and what does that mean? I mean, what does it mean to me?
Well, we get right,
No, I don't. It's garbage in my packet.
we get
And
access
if
to.
we're paying $11,000 for it, I'd like to discuss that.
Right, we get access to all the resources that the league brings to every municipality that's a member. So it's, they're representing municipalities at the state level, they're doing fact-finding. I don't know if Jesse, if you can help me out.
Legislative
free
research.
Human resources help as far as advertising help.
So the staff uses it
Yeah, oh, yes,
all the time?
yes.
And do we pay for staff membership and then council membership, or do we just pay
It's
one?
citywide.
Citywide membership?
I
Thank
would
you. Good enough.
venture to say it actually benefits staff
Yeah.
more on
Oh,
a
yeah.
day-to-day
I've never
basis.
opened up
The publications do benefit the elected officials as far as legal opinions that come through
Yeah.
that the league will expound upon, and also legislation proposals and whatnot. So on that level, it does help you, the elected officials, but I think on a day-to-day basis, it actually would benefit city operations and staff.
Thanks, Justin.
Those double emails that come through on weekdays at 6 and 7 in the morning.
Yeah.
Your phone vibrates because you don't know how to turn it off.
Does anybody else have any spending side
Yes.
issues? Okay.
And I don't know if we can wait until Thursday, but there's a $9,000 number in for deer culling. And it sounds like it's become kind of a big issue where the police department handled it. The police department's liaison to that culling program has washed his hands of it. It's been quite a headache and a lot of staff hours trying to manage that whole culling program, and I'm wondering if we want to take that out of the budget for a year and maybe review that a little more for the next 12 months before we have $9,000 in the budget for culling deer that we don't know if we'll be able to cull or not yet.
So we have it in the budget for this year, but you're talking next.
Next year, yeah.
Okay.
Didn't we hire a local
Yeah.
bow hunter?
Yes, we did, and it's on the safety committee
For Thursday.
agenda to discuss whether or not we should continue that program. And the safety committee meets on Thursday. Perhaps if there comes a safety committee decision that comes out on Thursday, if the committee recommends not doing it and the council supports that recommendation, we can take the 9,000 out.
Okay.
And we do that at a later date.
Is there a motion for the?
When we have to vote on this all
For
against the
that?
Yeah, for taking out the
Right.
program.
Okay.
All right.
Make the motion.
There's a motion to take it out if recommended by public safety.
I think that's good.
So moved. Yeah.
Second.
I have one question on that. If public safety recommends that they want to keep it in there, can we still vote on it?
Yeah, you can still pull it.
Yeah, we can still pull it
Yeah.
out, okay.
Yeah.
Do anything the night of budget.
Right.
Can we volunteer to do it for free?
Yes.
Yeah.
I want
Okay,
to,
raise your hand if you agree.
So you're proposing to take it out if
If-
the safety committee
Yes.
concludes that it's the right thing to do?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Now, is the meeting time going to be in time to
It's Thursday.
have this affect the budget?
It's this Thursday.
Yes.
It's this week.
Yes.
Sweet.
Okay. Any other,
I have one more change maybe. I don't like to do this to the committee, but I'm coming back to an issue we already voted on. And I'm looking at the progress we made this year for 40,000 on cutting trees, which is pretty good. And I'm also looking at the budget. And I want to try to compromise number and put 40,000 into the emerald ash borer instead of 75.
Take 35 out.
Yeah.
Second that.
So reduce the ash
To
TAB
compromise.
to 40 from 75, so reduce it by $35,000.
okay,
That's the motion.
that's the motion. Is there a second?
I think it's a
Motion
good
is second.
compromise, and I think they did a good job this year with the 40,000, and we don't have to bring some outside contractors in.
Okay, if you support that, raise your hand.
Five.
Motion passes.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else on the spending side? Anything on the revenue side?
Well, I'm trying to find out, do we take into account, on our revenue side, do we take into account any of the, I know we take into account the licensing that we're gonna get or permit fees, but do we take into account any additional taxes that we will get in, for like development's gonna happen along Wauwatosa Road and that? Some of those homes will be built and will be,
They won't be tax received
they'll-
until
The
2017.
tax bill is based on the value as of 1/1, January 15. So anything that happens between January 1st, 15 and January 1st, 16, we'll be talking about a year from now.
okay,
There's a year late.
we'll do it like, okay.
I just have a question too about revenues. Like, for example, I'm not gonna, it's just a sample. I looked at the park revenue, like at 11,000 something, and I know, for example, they rent out their buildings, and they'll rent out River Barn Park in the middle of January and February, which is fine, but I think that the electric cost or the heating cost must be terrific that time of year to be renting out. I would like to make sure that what we do charge people to use the facilities is paying for their cleanup, for their good fair share, and I think that's a number we need to go over every year. It'd be different if we were just renting out our properties in the summertime where we don't have great expense of keeping them heated. Of course, we're gonna keep them heated to a minor degree for the pipes, but not to the degree of having a banquet there. So, I don't know, I just think, I know every year we relook at our fees, but I think that's very important to make sure that they're paying their way. Because there's a lot of other people that could use the revenue from these people, like the American Legion Hall that's all set up to be heated all winter.
All right, well, I will move 300,000 from undesignated reserve to be applied to the budget.
Second.
300,000.
Now, discussion.
Discussion.
dropping that from that still leaves us with what in the,
0.2.
For bean
It's
counter.
from the general fund.
We'll go down to about 15%, 15 and a quarter.
so 15 and a quarter, so it'd still be above what our policy is for 10 to 15%.
And that's before the 150 goes back.
And then plus probably 150, you're kind of guessing will go back in, so that would put us back up.
Well, I've accounted for that 150 when I got,
Have accounted for the
when I
150?
gave you that number.
Okay. So, but we're still above the 15%, which
It's
will
our
go along with
policy.
what our policy is right now for, general policy is for that reserve. Okay.
Any further discussion? If you support that, raise your hand.
6. Sticky motion passes. So what does that leave as our mill rate, or whatever the, call it?
Before the 300,000, we were at, up a little bit under 7 cents. Assuming the deer culling goes.
Big assumption there.
I know, but that's me.
Make or break the budget.
You know I like risk. So, with the $300,000 fund balance, we're looking at, less than 0.2 of a penny change increase. We're just over 305.
Good.
Estimated, because I don't have final numbers, I don't have final numbers yet from state manufacturing.
We didn't make up $750,000.
We cut, well, with the deer calling, if it goes, you guys cut 169,000 and then added 300,000 of revenue.
So that's 469,000.
Correct.
So we should be up a couple cents.
Well, part of that levy is going to, on the sewer bill,
It's
not
all
the general
It's all
bill.
the sewer that's left now, because the
Ah,
rest was
debt
like
service.
450 and some.
And debt service, right.
And that's
Gotcha.
a separate rate on top of the city rate.
Gotcha.
That only goes to sewer customers.
Correct.
Gotcha. Anything else anybody wants to discuss? Otherwise, look for a motion to approve the budget.
Second.
Motion to approve the budget.
Oh. That too, second.
You didn't want to do that, did you?
That was tricky.
Motion and second to approve the budget. I think we have a roll call vote, just for.
Alderman Meyer,
Aye.
Alderman Lozinski,
Aye.
Alderman Gero,
Aye.
Alderman Hawkins.
Aye.
Alderman Nervin,
Aye.
Alderman Adams,
Aye.
Mayor Avondroth,
Aye.
Alderman Strelcheck,
Aye.
Alderman Bouquet.
Aye.
Motion passes. 9-0.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
And we gotta stick around though, no
Second.
move.
I'll second.
We have a
All those in
water
favor say
meeting
aye.
and a
Aye.
sewer meeting.
Anybody opposed?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
I need to get some water.
Want to let sewer and water over another night, or?
Batteries.
Yeah, good idea.
Do
Good
you want to
idea.
do sewer and water? You want to do sewer and water?
Well, they're gonna go fast, aren't they, or?
I would assume so.
Well, they're here too. They're
You don't
here.
have to come back for a separate